Mrs. Hale is pregnant. The champagne flute stopped halfway to my lips. For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. The ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel was packed with more than 300 people, board members, investment bankers, journalists, government consultants, senior executives, and enough wealthy strangers to purchase half the skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. A 40-foot LED screen behind the stage displayed the words, Hale Meridian Group, the next ERA below it, in smaller gold letters. $2. 4 billion strategic ASCAN. It was supposed to be the greatest night of my wife's career. Instead, it became the night my marriage ended. Adrienne Cross stood beside Victoria with one hand resting on the back of her chair. Not touching her. Not quite. Just close enough that anyone watching could understand what he wanted them to think. He was 29, 6 years younger than me, dressed in a custom tuxedo that probably cost more than the first car Victoria and I had shared. His smile was relaxed, confident, almost triumphant. A few people around the table laughed uncertainly. Someone from the investment bank lifted his glass. Pregnant, another executive grinned. Well, that's one way to make tonight even more memorable. Victoria didn't laugh. Neither did I. She sat completely still. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her water glass. That was when I knew. Before Adrienne said another word. Before anyone looked at me. Before my wife admitted anything. I knew. Adrienne slowly raised his champagne flute. Since everyone is going to find out eventually, he said, I suppose tonight is as good a time as any. The conversations at the nearby tables began dying. People turned. Victoria whispered something. Adrienne. He ignored her. That was the first thing that surprised me. The second was that she let him. He looked across the table, directly at me. Then he smiled. And yes, he said, the baby is mine. Silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind of silence that comes when hundreds of people suddenly realize they are witnessing something they will talk about for years. Someone lowered a fork. A camera shutter clicked. Then another. 3 tables away. A journalist lifted her phone. I could practically see tomorrow's headlines being written. Billion-dollar CEO's secret pregnancy exposed at corporate gala. Executive Aide claims CEO's child in front of husband. Hale Meridian celebration erupts into personal scandale. Didn't look at Adrienne. I looked at my wife. Victoria Hale, founder and CEO of Hale Meridian Group. My wife of 6 years. The woman who had once slept beside me on a mattress on the floor because we couldn't afford a bed frame. The woman who had cried in my arms when her first company account dropped below $30,000. The woman who had promised me, on our wedding day, that if the entire world turned against us, at least we would still have each other. That woman wouldn't meet my eyes. Victoria. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. She finally looked at me. There was no confusion in her expression. No outrage. No disbelief. Only guilt. And fear. Not fear of losing me. Fear of what I might do in front of all these people. That realization hurt more than Adrienne's words. I set my champagne flute down. Is it true? Victoria's lips parted. Ethan, is the child his? Adrienne gave a quiet laugh. You heard me. I still didn't look at him. I asked my wife. Victoria's expression hardened slightly. It was the expression she used in boardrooms whenever she felt cornered. 6 years ago, I had admired that expression. Tonight, I hated it. This isn't the place. A strange sound came from somewhere behind me. Maybe someone shifting in a chair. Maybe someone trying not to gasp. I leaned back. Then where was the place? Victoria glanced around. There were cameras everywhere. Phones everywhere. People everywhere. Her voice dropped. Please. I almost smiled. Please. Interesting word. She hadn't used it when she told me I couldn't attend her investor dinner last month because Adrienne thought my presence might make the atmosphere too domestic. She hadn't used it when she canceled our anniversary dinner 40 minutes before the reservation because Adrienne had arranged an emergency strategy meeting. She hadn't used it when I found his cuff links in the guest bathroom of our house. She had told me they were there because he'd worked late. I had believed her. Or maybe I had simply chosen not to investigate the lie. Sometimes love doesn't make you blind. Sometimes it makes you deliberately look away. Ethan, she said again. Then came the sentence I would remember long after everything else about that night became irrelevant. Don't make a scene tonight. Something inside me went completely still. Not broken. Still. There is a difference. A broken man wants answers. A broken man shouts. He asks why. He demands explanations because some part of him still believes the right explanation might make the pain survivable. I didn't want an explanation anymore. I looked around the ballroom. 300 people were watching. At the center table sat Victoria's mother, Margaret Hale, wearing diamonds I'd helped Victoria buy for her 5 years earlier. She looked embarrassed. Not for me. By me. As though my presence had suddenly become the uncomfortable part of this situation. Margaret leaned toward me. "Ethan," she whispered sharply, "whatever you're feeling, control yourself." I turned my head. She lowered her voice further. "This is the most important night of Victoria's career." I stared at her. For several seconds, I genuinely couldn't think of anything to say. Then I asked, "Her aide just announced that my wife is carrying his child." Margaret's jaw tightened. "And making a spectacle of yourself won't change that." Adrian smiled into his glass. Victoria closed her eyes briefly. Nobody defended me. That was almost funny. Almost. 6 years. I had spent 6 years making sure Victoria never had to stand alone in a room like this. And now, in less than 6 minutes, I finally understood exactly how alone I had been in our marriage. Adrian leaned forward. "Look, Ethan." There it was. The false sympathy. The tone men use when they want humiliation to sound like kindness. "I know this isn't how anyone wanted you to find out." I looked at him for the first time. He had the decency to look pleased with himself. "You seem pretty happy with how I found out." His smile widened. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Victoria snapped. "Adrian, enough." But there was no real anger behind it. No consequence. Just a mild correction. The kind a woman might give a boyfriend who had made an inappropriate joke. Adrian shrugged. "I just think pretending isn't helping anyone anymore." He looked at Victoria, then at me. The truth was going to come out. I nodded. "Apparently." "Ethan." Victoria's voice was sharper now. I turned back to her. She lowered her voice. "We'll talk at home." "No." That seemed to surprise her. "What? We won't." "Don't be ridiculous." There it was. Not apology. Not remorse. Authority. Victoria had become very good at giving orders. Over the last 3 years, everyone around her had learned to obey quickly. Senior executives, lawyers, assistants, bankers, suppliers. Eventually, she had started speaking to me the same way. And eventually, without noticing, I had started allowing it. "Not tonight." She stared at me. I reached for my left hand. My wedding ring had been there for 6 years. Simple platinum. No engraving. No diamonds. Victoria and I had bought our rings when Hale Meridian was still operating out of a rented office above a dental clinic. She had laughed when the jeweler suggested something more expensive. "We'll upgrade them when we're rich." We never did. By the time we became rich enough to buy anything, the cheap ring had become sentimental. At least to me. I twisted it once, then pulled it off. Victoria watched. For the first time that evening, genuine panic appeared in her eyes. "Ethan." I placed the ring on the white tablecloth, beside her champagne glass. Adrian's smile disappeared for half a second. Margaret inhaled sharply. Victoria stared at the ring. "What are you doing?" I stood. "Congratulations." Her eyes snapped up. "What?" I looked at Adrian, then back at my wife. "Congratulations on the baby." "Ethan, sit down." "No. You're emotional." I almost laughed. That was the word she chose. Emotional. As though I had knocked over a chair. As though I had screamed. As though I had done anything except stand up. "You don't want to do this tonight," she said. "Actually, tonight seems perfect. Tomorrow is the final signing." There it was. The real concern. The acquisition. For 14 months, Hale Meridian had been negotiating the purchase of Viridian Systems, a privately held infrastructure and industrial technology company with assets across North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia. The transaction was worth $2.4 billion. If it closed, Hale Meridian would nearly double its international footprint. Victoria would become one of the most powerful executives in her sector. Financial magazines had already prepared cover stories. The board had approved new compensation packages. Adrian had spent the last month behaving like he personally owned the building. And tomorrow morning, at 10, the final transaction documents were supposed to be signed. Victoria looked at me. "Whatever happens between us cannot affect tomorrow." I studied her face. That sentence told me more than any confession could have. Of course. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She thought I was agreeing. Then I added, "Whatever happens tomorrow has nothing to do with us anymore." Her expression changed. "What does that mean?" Exactly what I said. Adrian stood. He was nearly as tall as I was. though considerably thinner. He buttoned his jacket. A ridiculous gesture. Almost theatrical. Maybe you should leave. I looked at him. He had just publicly announced that he had impregnated my wife. Now he was ordering me out of the event. I waited for Victoria to say something. She didn't. Adrian mistook my silence for hesitation. This is Victoria's night, he said. People are here to celebrate her achievement. Whatever issues exist in your marriage, you don't need to ruin this for her. My marriage. He said it like he wasn't the man sleeping with my wife. I smiled. Not because anything was funny. Because suddenly the entire situation became incredibly clear. Adrian thought he had won. He thought Victoria was the prize. The mansion, the private jet, the company, the social status, the magazine covers, the invitations. He thought all of it belonged to her. And therefore, once he replaced me, it would eventually belong to him. He had no idea how much of the ground beneath his feet existed because I had put it there. Neither did Victoria. That was partly my fault. Years ago, she had asked me to stay invisible. Not in those exact words, but close enough. We had been sitting in the tiny kitchen of our first apartment. Hale Meridian was preparing for its first serious institutional funding round. Victoria had looked exhausted, terrified, excited. I need them to believe in me, she'd said. They do. No, they believe because you introduced us. So I don't want to be somebody's wife who got funded because her husband knows people. I remembered reaching across the table, taking her hand. You won't be. She had looked at me. What if you stayed out of the meetings? I hadn't hesitated. Okay. What if the introductions came through the company instead of directly through you? Fine. What if we don't mention your involvement publicly? I smiled. Victoria, I don't care whose name is on the article. She had cried. She came around the table and wrapped her arms around me. I'll never forget this. But people forget slowly. First, she stopped mentioning my help. Then she stopped acknowledging it privately. Then she started accepting compliments for things we had built together. Eventually, the story changed. Victoria Hale became the brilliant self-made founder. Ethan Cole became the quiet husband, then the unemployed husband. Then, according to several online gossip pages, the stay-at-home spouse living off his billionaire wife. I could have corrected them. I didn't, because I had made Victoria a promise. And because I loved her. Adrian stepped closer. You'll make this easier on yourself if you leave with some dignity. That brought me back to the ballroom. I looked at him. Dignity, yes. He glanced around. You don't want people remembering you as the bitter husband who couldn't accept reality. I nodded slowly. That's good advice. His eyebrows rose. He wasn't expecting agreement. I picked up my phone. Not the second phone. My ordinary one. I placed it on the table beside Victoria. There are divorce attorneys in my contacts. Have yours call mine. Victoria stood so quickly her chair moved backward. Ethan. Several cameras flashed. I ignored them. Her voice dropped. You are not announcing a divorce tonight. I didn't announce anything. I looked at Adrian. He did. Adrian's face tightened. Victoria reached for my wrist. I stepped back before she touched me. That hurt her. I saw it. Good. Maybe I wasn't as calm as I thought. Go home. She whispered. Please. We will discuss this after tomorrow. After the deal? Yes. Of course. Her eyes narrowed. Why are you saying it like that? I didn't answer. Margaret stood. Ethan. Enough. You've already embarrassed Victoria. I looked at her. No. Margaret. I glanced at Adrian. He embarrassed her. Then at Victoria. She allowed it. Margaret's face flushed. You've lived an extremely comfortable life because of my daughter. There were murmurs around us. I could feel people listening. She continued anyway. The house. The travel. The connections. Everything you have came from Victoria. If your marriage ends, I suggest you remember that before you start making threats. Victoria finally said, Mom. But Margaret wasn't finished. Adrian may have handled tonight poorly, but at least he understands Victoria's world. He's ambitious. He contributes something. Adrian tried unsuccessfully to hide his satisfaction. I nodded. Then you should all be very happy together. Margaret frowned. What is that supposed to mean? It means I hope Adrian can contribute enough. I turned away. Behind me, Victoria called my name. I kept walking. The crowd parted. Nobody stopped me. The ballroom doors opened. I stepped into the corridor. The noise returned behind me almost immediately. Muted at first, then louder. Questions. Arguments. Phones ringing. Someone from public relations was probably already trying to invent a statement. I walked toward the elevator. My phone vibrated. Victoria calling. I declined it. It rang again. Declined. Again. Declined. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. A young waiter pushing a cart saw me and froze. Mr. Cole. I pressed the button for the lobby. He looked embarrassed. I'm sorry. I studied him. For what? He didn't know how to answer. I smiled faintly. Neither am I. The doors closed. For the first time all night, I was alone. I looked at my left hand. The pale indentation where my wedding ring had been was still visible. 6 years. I thought grief would arrive. Instead, there was relief. Cold, unfamiliar relief. My jacket vibrated. Not my regular phone. The other one. I reached into the inner pocket and removed a black device. Victoria had never seen it. Very few people had the number. There were 7 unread messages. The first came from Julian Mercer. Ethan, final documents are prepared. Need Northstar authorization before 9:00 a.m. The second, Viridian Board has approved all revised conditions. Waiting on you. The third came from our legal director. Patent license riders executed pending principal authorization. The fourth came from our risk committee. We still have concerns regarding Hale Meridian governance exposure. Recommend conditional approval only. I stared at that one. Governance exposure. They had raised the issue 2 weeks earlier. Adrian had been accessing documents beyond his authorization level. Victoria had overridden internal objections. At the time, I had told the committee to continue. I trusted her. That was almost funny now. Another message appeared. Julian Mercer. Need your final answer tonight. The elevator descended. 42, 41, 40. I opened a secure application. Northstar Strategic Holdings. A list of pending authorizations appeared. At the top, Viridian Systems / Hale Meridian GRUP transaction value. $2 400,000,000 principal authorization. Pending for 14 months. Victoria believed Hale Meridian had secured the deal because of her negotiating ability. She wasn't entirely wrong. She had worked hard. She was brilliant. That was one of the reasons I had loved her. But brilliance wasn't enough for a transaction this complicated. Viridian's acquisition required access to proprietary industrial software controlled through 2 Northstar affiliates. It required a financing consortium in which Northstar was the anchor risk participant. It required patent licensing agreements that I had personally negotiated years earlier. And it required a strategic authorization that only 3 people could give. I was one of them. More importantly, for this transaction, I was the designated principal. The elevator passed 30. My ordinary phone rang again. Victoria. I answered this time. What? She exhaled. Where are you? Elevator. Come back upstairs. No. Ethan. Listen to me. Adrian shouldn't have said that. I almost admired the wording. Not. I shouldn't have slept with him. Not. I'm sorry. Adrian shouldn't have said it. So the problem is that he announced it. That isn't what I mean. Then what do you mean? Silence. Behind her, I heard people speaking rapidly. Someone mentioned the press. Someone else mentioned the board. Victoria lowered her voice. I was going to tell you. When? Soon. The child already exists. Victoria. She inhaled sharply. How long were you planning to wait? Can we please not do this over the phone? You seemed comfortable doing it in front of 300 people. That was Adrian. And you said nothing. I was shocked. You weren't shocked that you were pregnant. Silence. You were shocked, he told me. She didn't answer. The elevator reached 22. Ethan. She said. Tomorrow matters. I closed my eyes. There it was again. Tomorrow. The deal. Always the deal. I know. Whatever you're feeling. Don't do anything impulsive. I looked at the Northstar authorization screen. Impulsive? Yes. Like sleeping with your aide? Ethan. Or getting pregnant by him? Stop. Or letting him announce it at your corporate gala. Her voice sharpened. I said stop. And for the first time that night, I laughed. Quietly. Not because it was funny. Because I finally understood how absurd our marriage had become. She could betray me. Lie to me. Humiliate me. But I was still expected to obey when she said stop. Good night. Victoria. Ethan. Wait. I ended the call. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. I didn't move immediately. Instead, I tapped Julian's name. He answered on the first ring. Ethan. Julian. I've been trying to reach you. I know. We need the authorization tonight. Viridian's board wants confirmation before markets open tomorrow. You won't get it. Silence. Then, explain. I looked back toward the elevator doors. For years, I had separated my marriage from business. I had never used Northstar to control Victoria. never threatened her with money, never demanded equity, never reminded her that some of the most important doors in her career had opened because I had knocked first. Even now, I wasn't going to destroy Hale Meridian because my wife had cheated. That would have been revenge. Petty. Emotional. But North Star's risk committee had already warned me. Unauthorized executive access. Governance failures. Potential conflicts of interest. I had overridden their concerns because I trusted Victoria. That trust no longer existed. And without it, there was no commercial reason to expose North Star to $2 billion in transaction risk. The governance concerns were valid. I said. Julian was silent for 2 seconds. Then his tone changed. Professional now. You're withdrawing support. Yes. Completely? Completely. Ethan, once I notify the consortium, this will move fast. I know. Credit commitments may freeze tonight. I know. Viridian could reopen negotiations with other bidders. I know. And Hale Meridian's board will want an explanation. They can have one. Julian paused. Does Victoria know? I looked through the glass doors toward the city. Cars moved through the ring. No. Another pause. Then Julian asked, Are you sure? Upstairs. Victoria was probably trying to save her public image. Adrian was probably enjoying the attention. Margaret was probably explaining to anyone who would listen that her daughter deserved a more suitable man. I thought about my wedding ring sitting beside Victoria's champagne glass. I thought about her saying, Don't make a scene tonight. No more exceptions. I said. Julian understood. All right. I opened the secure authorization page. There were 2 options. Authorize withdraw. My thumb hovered for less than a second. Then I pressed. Withdraw. A warning appeared. Withdrawal of principal authorization may result in immediate suspension of financing, licensing, and strategic participation. Confirm? I pressed. Confirm. The screen changed. Authorization withdrawn, 9:47 p.m. That was it. No dramatic sound. No explosion. No applause. Just 4 words on a black screen. 14 months of negotiations had just lost the foundation beneath them. Julian exhaled. I'll notify the committee. Do it. And Ethan? Yes, I'm sorry. I knew he wasn't talking about the deal. Don't be. I ended the call. Then I walked out of the hotel. Upstairs, Victoria was standing in a private conference room while 6 members of her communications team argued about how to contain the scandal. Adrian stood near the window. Margaret sat on the sofa. Victoria's phone vibrated. She ignored it. It vibrated again. Victoria, her chief financial officer said, We need to decide whether we're confirming the pregnancy. Not now. The press already has video. I said not now. Her phone vibrated a 3rd time. She grabbed it. An email. She opened it. Her face changed. Adrian noticed. What? Victoria didn't answer. Another message arrived. Then another. Her CFO's phone rang. He answered. Listened. Went pale. What happened? Victoria demanded. He slowly lowered the phone. Mercer Global just suspended tomorrow's signing. Nobody moved. Victoria stared at him. What? They've suspended the transaction. That isn't possible. Another executive rushed into the room. Victoria, Westbridge Bank just froze its financing commitment. Her face drained. Why? We don't know. Her phone rang. This time she answered immediately. Hello. She listened. Her fingers tightened around the device. What do you mean the license authorization is withdrawn? Adrian stepped closer. Victoria? She raised one hand, silencing him. No. Listen to me. We have signed preliminary agreements. You can't simply. The person on the other end interrupted. Victoria stopped talking. Her eyes widened. What principle? Silence. What authorization? Another phone began ringing. Then another. The CFO stared at his tablet. His expression became worse by the second. Victoria. She turned. What? He swallowed. The transaction status changed. To what? He rotated the screen toward her. One line appeared across the internal deal portal. Transaction status. SUSPE. Victoria stared at it. For several seconds, nobody spoke. 300 people were still celebrating on the other side of the ballroom doors. The giant screen still displayed. $2 billion strategic and champagne was still being poured. Journalists were still writing about her pregnancy. Adrian was still standing where her husband should have been. But suddenly none of that mattered. Because the biggest transaction of Victoria Hale's career had just died. And she had absolutely no idea why. Downstairs, I stepped into the rain. My phone rang again. Victoria. I looked at her name, then silenced it. For 6 years. Whenever Victoria fell, I had been there before she hit the ground. Every crisis, every failed negotiation, every investor panic, every impossible deadline. She had never learned what falling actually felt like. Maybe that was my biggest mistake. I slipped the phone into my pocket and walked toward the waiting car. Behind me, 40 floors above the street, the lights of the Grand Meridian Ballroom burned like gold against the night. I didn't look back. For the first time in 6 years, Victoria Hale was going to face the consequences of her choices without me standing underneath them. And she still had no idea what I had taken away. Not yet. At 9:58 p.m., Hale Meridian's chief financial officer received the second call. At 10:01, the third. By 10:08, the room had stopped pretending the problem was temporary. I knew none of that yet. I was sitting in the back seat of a black sedan, watching rain slide down the window as Manhattan disappeared behind us. My regular phone had vibrated 14 times. Victoria had called 9. Margaret twice. 3 other calls came from numbers I recognized as Hale Meridian executives. I answered none of them. My second phone remained silent. That was more important. Northstar did not panic. Northstar acted. When I withdrew authorization, the risk committee automatically began executing the protections built into the transaction. Financing, technology access, patent licensing, insurance coverage, voting commitments. Everything connected to Northstar's participation began freezing in sequence. No one at Hale Meridian understood that yet. They would. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Home, Mr. Cole. I looked at the city lights. No. He waited. Northstar office. He nodded. We turned downtown. My regular phone vibrated again. This time it was a text. Victoria, answer your phone. Another. Victoria, the deal has been suspended. Then, Victoria, do you know anything about this? I stared at that one longer. Interesting. Not. Why did you leave? Not. I'm sorry. Not. Can we talk about us? The first thing she truly needed from me tonight was information. I locked the screen. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. Victoria, Ethan, this is serious. I almost laughed. Apparently, the pregnancy announcement had not qualified. At Northstar headquarters, security waved me through the private garage without asking for identification. The elevator opened directly onto the 36th floor. The office was mostly dark. Northstar employed hundreds of people globally. But the strategic committee floor was designed to feel almost empty. No giant logos. No inspirational slogans. No walls covered with magazine covers. Just glass, steel, dark wood, and people who understood the value of not announcing every important thing they controlled. Julian Mercer was waiting inside the conference room. He had removed his tie. 3 screens displayed transaction diagrams. Several sections that had been green earlier were now red. 11 minutes. He said. I took off my coat. For what? For the financing structure to start collapsing. I sat. Faster than expected. Westbridge suspended first. He tapped the screen. Then Helix Capital froze the mezzanine facility. Orion Insurance invoked the governance review clause. 2 technology affiliates suspended license transfers. Viridian's board called an emergency session. Good. Julian studied me. You don't sound happy. I'm not. Most men whose wives announce another man's baby in front of 300 people might enjoy this. I didn't withdraw because she cheated. No. I looked at him. You read the risk committee report. Yes. Were they wrong? No. Then that's the answer. Julian leaned back. Adrian cross-accessed transaction materials 6 times outside his approved permissions. 7. His eyebrow rose. The 7th happened tonight. I opened a message from our internal audit team. Adrian had accessed a restricted data room 43 minutes before the gala began. The file included negotiation assumptions, patent pricing, and regulatory contingencies. None of it should have been accessible to Victoria's executive aide. Julian read the summary. Victoria approved his access. Override code came from her office. That doesn't necessarily mean she personally approved it. No, but you'll assume responsibility stays with her. She's the CEO. Julian nodded slowly. That was the part people like Victoria had started forgetting. Power did not just mean being obeyed. It meant owning the consequences of everyone you chose to empower. My regular phone rang. Victoria again. Julian glanced at it. You going to answer? Eventually. Cruel. No. I turned the phone face down. Efficient. Across town. Victoria was not having an efficient night. I learned most of what happened later. At 10:12 p.m., she ordered everyone except her CFO, General Counsel, Adrian, and Margaret out of the private conference room. She still wore the white evening gown she had chosen for the celebration. Photographers had spent the first hour calling it iconic. By 10:15, she had spilled coffee across the sleeve. Her CFO, Daniel Reeves, stood at the conference table surrounded by 4 tablets and 2 laptops. "I need someone to explain this to me," Victoria said. Daniel looked exhausted. "We're trying." "No, stop saying that." Her voice cracked like a whip. "I want a reason." The general counsel looked up. Mercer Global's notice cites withdrawal of principal strategic authorization. Whose authorization? They didn't say. Then called Julian. "We have. And he's unavailable." Victoria laughed once. Sharp, disbelieving. "Julian Mercer has been answering my calls personally for 14 months. No one replied. Call him again." Adrian stood near the window, still holding a champagne glass. That detail bothered Daniel enough that he later told me about it. While everyone else was trying to save a $2 billion transaction, Adrian was still drinking. It could be a pressure tactic, Adrian said. Victoria looked at him. "What? A last-minute renegotiation?" Daniel frowned. "By whom? Viridian? Mercer? Maybe one of the banks. Why?" "To improve economics." Daniel shook his head. "That doesn't fit the notices." Adrian's expression tightened. "Deals this size get messy." Daniel stared at him. "So do small ones." "That doesn't make your explanation useful." Adrian moved toward Victoria. "We shouldn't panic." Victoria looked at Daniel. "Can the deal close without Mercer?" "No." "Can we replace them?" "Not by tomorrow." "How long?" Daniel hesitated. "Months." Margaret frowned. "Months? Potentially longer." Victoria's face hardened. "That's unacceptable." Daniel almost looked offended. "It's not a restaurant reservation." "Victoria." She turned on him. "Then fix it." Silence. Daniel had worked for Victoria for years. He was one of the few executives who occasionally told her things she didn't want to hear. Tonight he did it again. "I can't fix a transaction when I don't know who's pulling the authorization." Victoria crossed her arms. "Someone is." "Yes." "Then find them." Adrian said. "We should contact alternative capital." Daniel looked at him. "Alternative capital doesn't solve the license problem." "What license problem?" Daniel stared at him. That question was apparently the first moment anyone in that room truly began wondering how much Adrian understood about the transaction he had spent months boasting about. The Viridian acquisition requires transfer rights to the Atlas operating stack. So, those rights sit inside Northstar-affiliated entities. Adrian shrugged. "Then negotiate with them." Daniel's stare became colder. "We have been negotiating with them." Victoria interrupted. "Northstar already approved." "Preliminarily." "What does that mean?" "Exactly what it sounds like." She stepped closer. "Daniel." He sighed. "Northstar granted conditional participation last year. Final authorization was always required before closing." "No one told me that." The general counsel spoke carefully. "It is in the transaction structure." Victoria turned. "Then why wasn't it highlighted?" "It was." Silence. Victoria's expression changed. "By whom?" Daniel answered. "Several people." She didn't ask more, because that answer made the problem worse. It meant she had been told. She simply had not paid attention. Her phone rang. She answered. "Julian, no." "Ms. Hale," said a voice from Westbridge Bank. "This is Martin Choi." She walked toward the windows. "Martin, tell me what is happening." "We've suspended the primary debt commitment." "On whose instruction?" "Our internal risk committee." "Why?" "The anchor participation changed." "What anchor participation?" A pause. "We are not authorized to discuss another party's position." "Martin, Hale Meridian has banked with Westbridge for 9 years." "I understand. I personally introduced you to our board." "I know." "Then tell me who withdrew." "I can't." She closed her eyes. "What would it take to restore the commitment?" "Resolution of the underlying risk concerns." "What concerns?" "Governance and transaction control." She turned slowly. Adrian was standing 10 feet away. "What governance concerns?" Another pause. "I recommend you speak with Mercer Global." The call ended. Victoria lowered her phone. Adrian smiled weakly. "This is good." Everyone looked at him. He lifted both hands. "At least now we know it's governance." "That's fixable," Daniel said. "Do we?" "Yes." "How?" "We make personnel changes if necessary." Victoria stared at him. Something passed across her face, then disappeared. Margaret noticed. "Victoria?" "Nothing." She looked away. At 10:19, The Viridian board formally postponed the signing. At 10:21, a European regulatory advisor withdrew from the scheduled announcement call. At 10:24, two board members from Hale Meridian requested an emergency meeting before sunrise. At 10:26, the company's head of communications walked in without knocking. "We have another problem." Victoria laughed bitterly. "Of course we do. The video is everywhere." "What video?" The communications director held out her phone. Adrian's announcement, captured from 3 angles. One showed his face clearly. One showed Victoria's silence. One showed me removing my wedding ring. That one had already crossed 8 million views. Victoria watched it once. Then again. On the second viewing, she focused on me. Not Adrian. Me. I looked strangely calm in the video. Almost detached. That bothered her. She later told me she had expected anger. She understood anger. Anger meant attachment. Anger meant emotion could still be negotiated. The man in the video looked finished. "What are people saying?" she asked. The communications director hesitated. "Nothing useful." "Tell me." "Most of the coverage is calling this a leadership crisis." "Because I'm pregnant." "No." "Because of the affair?" "Partly." "What else?" "The timing." Victoria's face tightened. "Explain." "The deal suspension happened less than 15 minutes after Mr. Cole left." Adrian laughed. "That's ridiculous." No one joined him. He looked around. "What? You think Ethan did this?" The communications director said nothing. Adrian's smile disappeared. "He doesn't even work in finance." Daniel's eyes flicked toward him. Victoria noticed. "What?" Daniel looked away. "Nothing." "Daniel." He rubbed his forehead. "I met Ethan at a financing dinner 4 years ago." Victoria frowned. "So, he knew everyone." Adrian scoffed. "People know him because he's Victoria's husband." Daniel ignored him. "I thought that too." Victoria went still. Daniel continued. "Until Julian Mercer walked in and asked Ethan which structure he preferred." Victoria stared. "When?" "The Crescent financing." "That was 4 years ago." "Yes. You never told me." Daniel's expression was almost incredulous. "I assumed you knew." That sentence stayed in the room. Victoria's phone rang again. This time she looked at the name and answered instantly. "Ethan." I had finally called her back. At North Star. Julian left the conference room to speak with legal. I stood by the window. Victoria answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" "Out." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not home." "Come back." "No." Her breathing changed. "Ethan, something has happened." "I know. The transaction is suspended." "I know." Another pause. "How?" "The internet works." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Be sarcastic." I looked at the lights below. I wasn't. She lowered her voice. "Do you know Julian Mercer?" "Yes." "How well?" "Well enough." "What does that mean?" "It means I know him." "Ethan." There was an edge in her voice now. "Fear." "Not yet enough. But the beginning of it." "Daniel says he saw you with Julian years ago." "Daniel has a good memory." "Were you involved in the Crescent financing?" "Yes." "How?" "I introduced 2 parties." "To whom?" "You." She went quiet. I could almost see the old apartment. The spreadsheets. The nights we had spent pretending $30,000 was enough runway. Victoria finally said, "Why didn't you tell me?" I frowned. "You asked me not to." "What?" "You wanted investors to believe the company stood on its own." "That isn't the same thing." "It was at the time." Silence. Then she changed direction. "Do you know North Star?" "Yes." The word came out too easily. She noticed. "How, Victoria? How do you know North Star? Is this why you called?" "I called because my company may lose a $2.4 billion transaction." "And because your husband left you?" She said nothing. There was the answer. I nodded to myself. "Good night." "Wait." I didn't hang up. Her voice softened. "The first time all night. We need to talk." "We did." "No." She exhaled. "We need to talk properly. About Adrian. About everything." "When?" "Tomorrow." "After the signing?" She went silent. The answer was yes. Of course it was. "There may not be a signing tomorrow." I said. "Exactly." That single word ended something inside me. I almost pitied her. "Send the divorce papers." Her voice changed immediately. "Ethan, I'm serious. Don't make decisions tonight." I made one. "Because you're angry." "No." "Then why?" "Because you are carrying another man's child." She inhaled sharply. "That doesn't erase 6 years." "No." I looked at the North Star screens. "It explains the last one." She didn't speak. I continued. "I don't want the house." "What?" "I don't want your company's shares. I don't want alimony. I don't want your cars. I don't want anything from Hale Meridian." You're talking like lawyers are already involved. They will be tomorrow. Ethan, you wanted me not to make a scene. I smiled without humor. I won't. Then I ended the call. 11 minutes. That was how long it took for the deal to begin dying. 6 years. That was how long it took my marriage. The difference was that only one of them surprised Victoria. At 6:40 the next morning, I was drinking coffee in North Star's executive conference room when Victoria's board meeting began across town. I had slept 90 minutes. I felt better than expected. My lawyer, Rachel Stone, sat opposite me with a yellow legal pad. Are you sure? Yes. No negotiation? No. No asset claim? Correct. She studied me. You are legally entitled to seek more. I know. Victoria's company increased dramatically in value during the marriage. So did mine. Rachel's pen stopped. That was the problem with people who knew me professionally. They understood exactly how little I needed from Victoria. She leaned back. You want a clean separation? Yes. And the house? Which one? Her mouth twitched. The Manhattan residence. Trust property. The Hamptons house? Mine before marriage. Aspen, North Star retreat asset. Rachel stared at me. You let the press call you a kept husband for years. Yes. Why? I had better things to do. She shook her head. Men are strange. Lawyers are expensive. You can afford me. Unfortunately. She smiled, then became serious. What about the pregnancy? What about it? Are you going to challenge anything publicly? No. Paternity? Not unless Victoria lies about it. And if she does, then we use evidence. Rachel nodded. I'll prepare the petition. My second phone rang. Julian. I answered. They're in the boardroom. He said. I assumed. Victoria requested me personally. And I accepted. Rachel looked up. I stood. When now? Have fun. Julian laughed. You're not coming, no? She'll ask about you. Answer whatever is commercially relevant. That's a dangerous amount of freedom. I trust your judgment. There was a pause. Julian knew exactly what those words meant this morning. Understood. At 7:02, Julian Mercer walked into Hale Meridian's boardroom. Victoria was already there. So was Adrian. That was mistake number one. Daniel Reeves sat at the opposite side of the table with the general counsel. 7 directors joined in person. 3 appeared on screens. No one looked rested. The $2 billion acquisition dominated the screen at the far wall. Every major category was now red. Financing, suspended. Licensing, suspended. Strategic authorization, withdrawn. Closing, postponed. Victoria stood when Julian entered. Thank you for coming. Julian shook her hand. Victoria. He didn't greet Adrian. Adrian noticed. Everyone did. Julian sat. Victoria didn't waste time. I need to know exactly what happened last night. Julian placed a folder on the table. You lost principal authorization. From North Star. Yes. Why risk? What risk? Governance. Adrian leaned forward. We've already heard that word 10 times. Julian looked at him. Then hearing it in 11th probably won't hurt you. One director coughed to hide a laugh. Adrian's jaw tightened. Victoria said. Julian. He looked back at her. The risk committee had concerns regarding access controls, executive oversight, and conflicts of interest. What conflict? Julian's gaze moved briefly toward Adrian. Victoria followed it. Adrian straightened. This is absurd. Julian opened the folder. Mr. Cross-accessed restricted transaction data 7 times. Adrian scoffed. I work directly for the CEO. That does not automatically grant you transaction room permissions. Victoria approved it. Every eye turned toward her. Victoria looked at Adrian. Did I? He hesitated. You told me to stay informed. That isn't what I asked. You said I should understand everything related to the acquisition. Did I give you access authorization? Adrian's expression hardened. We've been working together for years. You never cared before. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Julian said nothing. He didn't need to. Victoria turned back to him. Is that why North Star withdrew? Partly. What else? Loss of confidence. Her face changed. In Hale Meridian? In its governance. That sounds like the same thing. It isn't. One of the independent directors leaned forward. What would restore confidence? Julian looked at him. That depends on the principal. Victoria's eyes narrowed. The principal? Yes. Who? Julian didn't answer. She waited. Julian. I am not authorized to identify private North Star principals. Adrian laughed. This is ridiculous. We are discussing a multi-billion-dollar public transaction, not a secret society. Julian looked at him. Then perhaps you should have treated the confidential data room with more respect. Adrian flushed. Victoria raised a hand. Enough. Then she looked at Julian. You have spent 14 months telling me this transaction was supported. It was. By whom? North Star. You keep talking like North Star is a person. Sometimes institutions have decision makers. Then let me speak to the decision maker. Julian's expression became unreadable. You already have. Silence. Victoria frowned. What? Julian leaned back. You've spoken to him many times. Adrian looked confused. Daniel didn't. That was what Victoria noticed. She turned toward her CFO. Daniel. He looked at her. What do you know? Not enough. Tell me. Daniel hesitated. Years ago, Ethan introduced me to Julian. The boardroom became completely still. Adrian laughed. Oh, come on. Nobody joined him. Victoria stared at Daniel. What does Ethan have to do with this? Daniel looked at Julian. Julian said nothing. That silence answered more than words. Victoria's face changed. No. Adrian shook his head. This is stupid. Ethan doesn't work for North Star. Julian looked at him. Do you know where Ethan works? Adrian opened his mouth, then stopped. He looked at Victoria. So did half the table. Victoria hated that. For years, people had asked what her husband did. She had developed several answers. Private investments, consulting, independent projects. Nothing that mattered enough to explain. Eventually, she had stopped answering at all. The truth was uglier. She didn't know. Not really. Ethan never asked her about every detail of Hale Meridian. And somewhere along the way, she had returned the favor. Except it had not been respect. It had been indifference. Ethan manages private investments. She said. Julian's mouth almost moved. Almost. Adrian seized on it. Exactly. Julian turned toward Victoria. Call him. Her jaw tightened. I did. And he wants a divorce. The words entered the room like a draft. No one looked at Adrian. That somehow made it worse. Julian nodded once. Then I suggest you handle that carefully. Victoria stared. Are you telling me my marriage is connected to this acquisition? No. Then why does Ethan matter? Julian considered his answer. Because you seem to have spent years assuming he doesn't. Adrian stood. This is insane. Julian looked up. Sit down. Something about his tone worked. Adrian sat. Julian turned back to Victoria. The deal cannot proceed without North Star's final strategic authorization. I know that now. Good. Who controls it? Julian paused. Then said, ask your husband. The room exploded. 3 directors spoke at once. Adrian swore. Victoria stayed completely still. Julian stood. That is all I can say without violating confidentiality. Victoria stood too. Julian. He looked at her. Are you telling me Ethan can restart the deal? I am telling you to ask him the right questions. Then he left. For almost a minute. No one spoke. Finally, one director asked quietly, Victoria, what exactly does your husband do? She stared at the closed door. I don't know. That was the first honest answer she had given all morning. It terrified her. At 9:15, my lawyer sent the divorce petition to Victoria's counsel. By 9:19, Victoria called me. I declined. At 9:22, she called again. Declined. At 9:27, she sent a message. We need to meet. Today. I replied. Regarding the divorce. Speak to Rachel. Her answer came immediately. Not about the divorce. I looked at it. Then typed. Then we have nothing to discuss. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally. Do you control North Star? I stared at the message. That was the first correct question she had asked. I didn't answer. At 10:03, she arrived at North Star's building. Security called my office. Mr. Cole. Victoria Hale is downstairs. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Fast learner. Let her up. Victoria entered 12 minutes later. No gown. No cameras. No CEO entourage. Just a black suit and exhaustion. She stopped when she saw my office. The room wasn't ostentatious. That wasn't what affected her. It was the fact that I had one. A real one. Large. Private. 36 floors above the city. On the wall behind my desk was a simple metal emblem. North Star Strategic Holdings. Victoria stared at it. Then at me. How long? Good morning to you too. How long have you worked here? I don't. She laughed bitterly. Don't play games. I don't work here. Then why are you in this office? Because it's mine. Silence. She looked at the photographs on the side wall. One showed Julian and me with 3 other founders in Singapore. Another showed a groundbreaking ceremony in Germany. Another showed me shaking hands with a technology executive Victoria had spent 2 years trying to meet. Her face slowly lost color. What is this, my work? You said you managed private investments. I do. This isn't private investing. Sometimes it is. She turned toward me. Are you one of Northstar's executives? No? Her shoulders relaxed for half a second. Then I added, I'm one of its founding principals. The relief vanished. She stared at me. I could almost hear 6 years rearranging themselves in her mind. Every introduction, every convenient meeting, every investor who had taken her call, every time I had said, I might know someone. You founded Northstar, one of 5. When? Before we married. Her voice became quiet. And you never told me. I did. No. You attended the first office opening. Victoria frowned. Then I watched the memory hit her. A small dinner. 7 years ago. She had stayed 40 minutes. Then left because Hale Meridian had a product crisis. She had called Northstar Ethan's little investment club. I remembered. Apparently now she did too. Her face hardened defensively. You never said it was this. It wasn't this then. How much do you own? Not relevant. To me it is. Why? She opened her mouth. No answer came. Because yesterday, my wealth had not mattered. My work had not mattered. My connections had not mattered. Until she needed them. She stepped closer. Did you suspend the deal? I withdrew Northstar's authorization. Her eyes widened. You did. Yes. Because of Adrian. No. Don't lie to me. I haven't started. Her face flushed. Ethan, 14 months of work were built around conditional approval. You knew how important this was. Yes. And you pulled it hours before closing. After your office created a material governance problem. My office? Adrian accessed protected transaction data. He works for me. Exactly. She stared. I continued. Northstar's committee recommended withdrawal before last night. When? 2 weeks ago. And you stopped them? Yes. Her expression shifted. Why? Because I trusted you. The words landed. I saw them hurt. Good. I told them Hale Meridian's internal controls would hold. She whispered. Ethan, I was wrong. She looked away. I walked around the desk. This isn't about the affair. How can you say that? Because I don't need to risk billions to punish you. Her head snapped back. This feels like punishment. Consequences often do. She stared at me for several seconds. Then she said the worst possible thing. Restore the authorization. Not. I'm sorry. Not. What have I done? Restore the authorization. I smiled faintly. No. Ethan. No. You don't understand what happens if this collapses. I understand better than you do. Thousands of employees will still have jobs tomorrow. Shareholders knew there was transaction risk. My board should have asked better questions. Her voice sharpened. And me? I looked at her. There it is. What? The real question. She went silent. I returned to my chair. You should leave. I'm not leaving until we solve this. There is no we. Her face changed. I pointed toward the door. You made that clear last night. For the first time, Victoria looked less like a CEO and more like the woman I had married. 12 hours ago. We were still married. 12 hours ago. I didn't know you were carrying Adrian's child. Her eyes filled. She blinked hard. I felt something move inside me. Old instinct. Comfort her. Protect her. Fix it. I killed the instinct before it reached my hands. Victoria whispered. Is there anything I can do? Yes. Hope appeared. I hated how quickly. Signed the divorce papers. Then I opened the file in front of me. The meeting was over. Adrian moved into my house 3 days later. Technically, he moved into Victoria's house. That was what he thought. The distinction became important by Friday. I found out because the security system sent me an automated alert. New resident access requested. Adrian Cross-Eye was having lunch with Rachel when the notification appeared. She glanced at my screen. You're going to deny it? No. Her eyebrows rose. Really? I approved the access request. Rachel stared. You are a much stranger man than I expected. Let him in. Why? I locked the phone. Because the fastest way to learn who someone really is to give them what they think they want. Adrian thought he wanted my life. He had no idea which parts belonged to me. By noon, he had posted a photograph. Not explicitly. Adrian was too careful for explicit. The image showed 2 coffee cups on the terrace of the Manhattan residence. One had Victoria's initials. The caption read, Some mornings feel like the beginning of everything. Social media did the rest. By 2, gossip accounts were calling him Victoria Hale's future husband. By 4, one business columnist had written, From executive aide to first gentleman of tech, Victoria made him delete the post. He did, but not before 13 million people saw it. At 5:30, My former house manager called. Mr. Cole, hello? Anna, I wasn't sure whether to bother you. You never bother me. She hesitated. Mr. Cross is moving items out of your study. I leaned back. What items? Books. Files. Some artwork. Anything marked North Star? No. Anything from the locked cabinet? No. He asked for the code. And I told him I didn't have it. Good. He said the room would become his office. I looked out the window. Let him. Anna went silent. Sir, move anything personal of mine into storage. Which storage? The Mercer facility. And the furniture? Leave it. All of it, yes. She sounded unhappy. Mr. Cole, I've worked in that house for 5 years. I know. May I say something? Of course. He's touching things like he already owns them. I smiled. That tends to happen before people read the paperwork. 2 hours later, Victoria called. I answered. What? Her voice was cold. Did you tell Anna not to cooperate with Adrian? No. She says she can't add him to certain household accounts. That isn't my problem. She says the accounts are under a trust. They are. What trust? Cole Residential Trust. Silence. Then, what? The entity that owns the property. The house is mine. No. We bought it together. You chose it. I paid for renovations. Hale Meridian's design division paid for some renovations as part of a magazine feature. You're being deliberately technical. Property law is usually technical. She exhaled. Ethan, what? Are you saying you own the house? The trust owns it. And you control the trust? Yes. Silence. I could hear Adrian speaking in the background. What did he say? I asked. Nothing. Then why is he talking? Her voice sharpened. He lives here now. I almost laughed. That was fast. Don't. I'm not judging. You are. No. Victoria. I looked at the file Rachel had sent. I'm observing. She went quiet. Then said, transfer the property. I thought I had misheard her. To whom? To me. For what reason? Because this is my home. It was our home. Ethan. Now apparently it is Adrian's office. She didn't answer. I continued. The trust will maintain your current residency until divorce terms are complete. Her voice became colder. You've thought about this? No. I turned a page. My lawyers have. You're really doing this. You asked me for a divorce. No. You had another man's child growing inside you. That is not the same thing. I laughed once. No. You're right. It's considerably more persuasive. She hung up. I didn't call back. The next morning, Hale Meridian's board learned about Adrian's first major mistake. He had begun introducing himself to external partners as part of Victoria's future leadership team. Not formally. Again, Adrian was careful. He used phrases like, when Victoria and I take the company into its next phase, our future strategy, once things settled down personally, he assumed everyone understood what was happening. They did, just not the way he hoped. At 10:15, Daniel Reeves entered Victoria's office carrying a printed email. What is this? Victoria looked up. What? Did you authorize Adrian to discuss board restructuring with Callahan Partners? She frowned. No. Daniel placed the email on her desk. Then why did he tell them he's expected to receive an executive operating role? Her face tightened. Adrian was sitting on the sofa. I said no such thing. Daniel looked at him. They quoted you. Then they misunderstood. 3 people misunderstood the same sentence. Adrian stood. Daniel, I think your problem with me is becoming personal. My problem with you is increasingly documented. Victoria raised her voice. Enough. Both men stopped. She looked at Adrian. What did you say? He sighed. That after the acquisition, the company would likely need a stronger operating structure, and that I would be willing to help. Daniel stared. You told them Victoria wanted you involved. Adrian shrugged. She does. Victoria's eyes narrowed. Do I? He looked at her. The confidence slipped slightly. We've discussed my future. Privately. Yes. Not with partners. Fine. Daniel folded his arms. There's more. Victoria closed her eyes. Of course there is. He placed another document down. 3 outside advisors have asked whether Adrian now has authority to negotiate on your behalf. Victoria looked at Adrian. He lifted his hands. People assume things. Daniel said, people assume things because you encourage them. Adrian stepped closer. You know what? Maybe you're uncomfortable because Victoria trusts me. Daniel laughed. That was apparently rare. Not a pleasant laugh. Trust? Adrian's face hardened. Daniel tapped the email. She trusted Ethan too. The room froze. Victoria stood. Get out. Daniel looked at her. Victoria, I said get out. He collected nothing. He He simply left. Adrian waited until the door closed. See? Victoria turned. See what? He's against me. No. Her tone was flat. He's doing his job. Adrian's face changed. You're defending him now? I'm telling you to stop speaking for me. He stared at her, then softened his voice. Victoria. He moved closer. You're under pressure. Don't. You haven't slept. I said don't. He stopped. Her phone buzzed. A message from legal. She opened it, then frowned. What is this? Adrian glanced. What? Victoria read aloud. Notice of asset classification and separate property disclosures. Her pulse quickened. Ethan's lawyers had begun listing assets. She expected brokerage accounts, old investments, perhaps the Hamptons property. What she did not expect was page after page. Cole Residential Trust, Manhattan Residency. C. Strategic Property Holdings, Aspen Residence North Star Retreat Services, Aviation Access Agreement Atlas Patent Holdings, Industrial Software Licenses. She stopped. Went back. Read again. Atlas Patent Holdings. The name was familiar. Too familiar. The Viridian acquisition depended on Atlas licensing. Victoria grabbed her phone and called General Counsel. Melissa. Yes. What is Atlas Patent Holdings? A pause. One of the licensing entities connected to the Viridian transaction. Connected how? They control two important software architecture patents. Who owns Atlas? I'll check. No. Now. Keyboard sounds. Victoria stood by the desk. Adrian watched her. Finally, Melissa said, it's privately held. By whom? Ultimate ownership is shielded through multiple entities. Keep going. Another pause. Then, one of the managing entities is Northstar IP Management. Victoria closed her eyes. Of course. Anything else? Yes. What? And Ethan Cole is listed as an authorized principal on several historic filings. The room became silent. Victoria hung up without saying goodbye. Adrian frowned. What? She looked at him. The patents. What patents? The ones the deal needs. His face changed. Ethan owns them. I don't know. She grabbed her jacket. Where are you going? To find out. Adrian stood. I'll come. No. Victoria. I said no. She left. I was at Northstar when she arrived. Again. This time without warning. Again. Security called. Again. I let her up. She entered carrying the legal disclosure. She threw it onto my desk. What else? I looked down. Good afternoon. What else belongs to you? That is a broad question. The house. Yes. The Aspen property. Technically an entity. The aviation contract. Yes. Atlas. I looked at her. There it was. She had reached the next layer. What about Atlas? Do you control it? Partly. Her face went pale. How partly? Northstar owns the managing entity. I hold significant voting authority. She laughed in disbelief. The patents my acquisition needs. Yes. You control them. I help control them. Stop correcting every word. Then use accurate ones. She slapped the papers on my desk. You sat in our house for years while I negotiated licenses from companies you controlled. No. Her eyes flashed. What do you mean no? You negotiated through your legal department. I recused myself from the approval process. That is not the point. What is? You knew. Yes. And you never told me. You never asked. I didn't know I had to ask whether my husband secretly controlled half the infrastructure around my company. Half is dramatic. Her eyes filled with anger. You think this is funny? No? Then explain it. I leaned back. 6 years ago, you asked me to stay out of Hale Meridian. I asked you not to interfere. You asked me not to let investors think your success came from me. That isn't the same thing. At first. No. She went silent. I continued. So I separated everything. My work from yours. My assets from yours. My investment decisions from your board. You made yourself invisible. For you. Her jaw tightened. That sounds manipulative. I stared at her. You asked for it. No. You did. She shook her head. I asked for independence. And I gave it to you. You hid your power. Because you didn't want anyone to think you benefited from it. She looked away. The truth hurt because neither of us had to exaggerate it. Years earlier, Victoria had wanted to prove she could succeed without being seen as someone's wife. I had admired that. I had supported it. Then somewhere along the way, she began enjoying the version of reality where I had contributed nothing. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. I said, you want to know the difference between privacy and deception? She looked at me. I never lied when you asked. You rarely answered. You rarely asked. Silence. Then she said, restore the patent licenses. They're currently under review. By you. By North Star. Which means you. No. She slapped one hand against the desk. Stop pretending there is a difference. There is. I stood. That's exactly the mistake Adrian keeps making. Her expression changed at his name. He has nothing to do with this conversation. He is the reason your internal controls are under review. You keep blaming him. I blame the person who approved him. That hit. Her face went still. I continued. Victoria, I did not destroy your deal. You pulled the authorization. Yes. You froze the licenses. North Star did. Because of you. Because the risk changed. She stepped closer. You are punishing me. No. Her voice cracked. Then what do you call this? I held her gaze. For 6 years. Every time Hale Meridian faced a problem, I solved part of it before you ever saw it. She said nothing. When banks hesitated, I made calls. Her breathing slowed. When investors panicked, I reassured them. Her eyes shifted. When licensing issues appeared, I helped negotiate behind the scenes. I took one step closer. You started thinking the ground beneath your feet was naturally stable. Her lips parted. It wasn't. The office became completely quiet. I finished. I haven't destroyed anything. Victoria. Then I said the sentence she would remember for a long time. I just stopped protecting it. She stared at me. Behind the anger, something else appeared. Fear. Real fear this time. Not fear of losing a deal. Fear that she had never understood her own life. Her phone rang. Adrian. She looked at his name. Then at me. I smiled faintly. Your future is calling. She flinched. For once. She didn't answer him. But she didn't stay either. Victoria picked up the disclosure papers. At the door, she stopped. Without turning, she asked, was any of it mine? I knew what she meant. The success. The company. The praise. The billion-dollar valuation. The empire. I could have hurt her. I could have said no. Instead, I told the truth. Most of it. She turned. You built Hale Meridian. I continued. You worked harder than anyone I knew. You made good decisions. You took risks I wouldn't have. Her eyes filled. Then why does it feel like none of it was real? Because you started believing you did it alone. She looked down. I added. You didn't. Neither did I. That was what marriage had once meant. She left without another word. 5 minutes later, Julian walked into my office. He looked toward the closed door. How did it go? She learned about Atlas. He winced. That one hurts. Yes. And the house? Yes. Aviation? Yes. He sat. What's next? I looked at the latest North Star audit report. There were 3 new alerts involving Adrian Cross. One included contact with an external investment firm. One involved a confidential file. One involved an account I did not recognize. I turned the screen toward Julian. This. His expression became serious. Do you want me to block him? No. You sure? I watched Adrian's access history continue populating. For 3 years. He had mistaken Victoria's protection for his own importance. Now he believed I was gone. He believed the house was his. The company would be next. Maybe even North Star's deal. People were most useful when they thought they had won. Let him keep going. I said. Julian frowned. Why? I looked at the screen. Because I want Victoria to see what she chose. And Adrian Cross, without realizing it, was about to show her everything. By Monday morning, Victoria had stopped asking whether I mattered to the Viridian deal. She had started asking how much. That was progress. Not enough to save anything, but progress. At 8:12 a.m., North Star's Risk Committee sent me a summary of Adrian Cross's activity over the previous 72 hours. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Julian. He called less than a minute later. You were right. I usually enjoy hearing that more. Cross contacted Harrington Capital. I leaned back in my chair. I saw. He sent them internal acquisition assumptions. I saw that too. Julian went quiet. There were some things even men in our business did not joke about. Harrington Capital had competed against Hale Meridian twice in the past 4 years. They had also attempted to acquire a minority stake in Viridian before Victoria entered negotiations. Adrian had contacted one of their managing directors through a private account. His message was careful, not criminally stupid, just professionally suicidal. He had written that Hale Meridian might be open to strategic realignment if the current transaction failed. He had suggested that certain confidential materials could help Harrington understand where the weaknesses were. In return, he wanted support, not for Victoria, for himself. One sentence stood out. If I am formally integrated into Hale Meridian's future leadership, I can make sure your interests are represented. Julian read it aloud, then said, "He's selling influence he doesn't have." "Yes." "Should we inform Victoria?" "Not yet. You're letting him continue." "For now." Julian exhaled. "You really want her to see this herself?" "I want evidence to be undeniable. She may still defend him." I looked at the city. "That would be useful too." Julian was silent. Then, "You've become unpleasant since your marriage ended." "It hasn't ended yet." "The lawyers would disagree." "Lawyers disagree professionally." He laughed once, then became serious. "There's another issue." "What?" "Victoria requested a direct meeting with the North Star Investment Committee." "Denied." "I assumed." "She wants to appeal the withdrawal. She can send written materials." "She wants you in the room." "No." "Ethan." "No." Julian sighed. "You know she's going to keep digging." "She should." "Into you." "Yes." "You spent years avoiding exactly that." "I spent years protecting her preference." "And now." I looked at Adrian's messages. "Now I don't care what she discovers." Across town, Victoria was doing exactly what Julian predicted. She had assembled 3 people in Hale Meridian's private executive library: Daniel Reeves, General Counsel Melissa Grant, and an external corporate intelligence advisor named Henry Vale. Victoria stood at the window. No assistants. No Adrian. That was new. "Start again," she said. Henry opened a file. North Star Strategic Holdings was founded approximately 9 years ago by 5 principals. Names. For our publicly connected. He listed them: Julian Mercer, Sophia Wren, Marcus Bell, Nathaniel Shaw. Victoria folded her arms. "And the 5th, Henry looked at her. "Ethan Cole." Even though she already knew, hearing it from an investigator affected her differently. She looked toward the window. "How much does he own?" "Ownership isn't simple. Nothing about him seems simple anymore." Henry nodded. "North Star isn't structured like a traditional public investment company. Voting rights are distributed through several entities. Different principals have authority over different sectors. Ethan's sector: technology infrastructure, intellectual property, strategic acquisitions." Daniel looked down at the table. Victoria noticed. "You knew?" "No." "You suspected?" Daniel hesitated. "Yes." "How long years?" Her eyes flashed. "And you said nothing?" Daniel stared back. "He was your husband." That shut her up. Melissa opened another folder. "We also reviewed the historical Hale Meridian transactions you requested." Victoria turned, and Melissa's expression was uncomfortable. "There are patterns." "What kind?" "In the first 3 years after your marriage, 7 major counterparties had direct or indirect relationships with North Star." Victoria didn't move. Daniel added, "Westbridge was introduced through Julian." Melissa continued, "The Korean distribution agreement came through a North Star portfolio company. The Helix credit facility, North Star helped structure it." Victoria stared. "What about the Atlas dispute?" Melissa looked at Henry. Henry answered, "Settled through a law firm that represented Ethan personally." Victoria walked to the table. "Keep going." Melissa swallowed. "The Berlin plant acquisition." "Yes." North Star acquired the distressed debt from the seller's parent company 2 months before you negotiated the purchase. Victoria's face slowly changed. "That gave us leverage." "Yes." "And the Singapore regulatory issue, resolved after a call from one of Nathaniel Shaw's offices." Victoria lowered herself into a chair. For years, she had considered these moments evidence of her instincts. Her timing. Her reputation. She had told interviews that Hale Meridian had grown because she knew how to recognize opportunity before anyone else. That was not false. But suddenly, every opportunity seemed to contain an invisible fingerprint. Ethan, not doing the work for her, not making decisions for her, just quietly making sure the doors opened. Henry turned a page. "There's one more thing." Victoria looked up. "What?" "The Viridian deal itself." Daniel stiffened. Henry continued. "Viridian's board was initially unwilling to sell to Hale Meridian." "I know. They rejected your first approach." "I know that too." "They reconsidered 3 weeks later." Victoria stared. "Because we improved the offer." "Partly." "What else?" Henry slid a document across the table. "A North Star-controlled debt vehicle acquired a blocking position in one of Viridian's creditor structures." Daniel picked it up. His face changed. Victoria said, "Meaning?" Daniel looked at her. "Meaning North Star became very difficult for Viridian to ignore." Victoria read the page. "And Ethan authorized this." Henry nodded. "He was the strategic principal." The room went silent. She whispered, "So the acquisition existed because Ethan made it possible." Daniel answered carefully, "No." Victoria looked at him. It existed because you pursued it. She waited. But, but it became executable because North Star aligned behind you. Her jaw tightened. She stood. I need Julian. Melissa said. Victoria, today. 20 minutes later. Julian was sitting in Hale Meridian's board lounge. He looked exactly as he always did. Calm. Expensive suit. No fear. Victoria hated him for that. She closed the door. Was the Viridian transaction built around Ethan? Julian did not pretend not to understand. Partly. Why? Because he supported it. Why? Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then, because he believed in you. Victoria's throat tightened. She ignored it. How much influence did he have? Enough. That's not an answer. It is the only answer you need. She stepped closer. I have spent 14 months negotiating this transaction. Yes. I led every presentation. Yes. I convinced Viridian's founder. Yes. I won the board. Yes. Her voice rose. Then why can Ethan destroy it with one button? Julian's expression became colder. He didn't destroy it with one button. She stopped. He withdrew a support structure that took years to build. That sounds like semantics. No. Julian leaned forward. You keep asking the wrong question. What is the right one? Why did North Star continue supporting you when the transaction risk deteriorated? Victoria went still. Julian answered for her. Ethan. She looked away. The committee wanted out before the gala. I know. He kept us in. I know. Because? She didn't answer. Julian spoke quietly. Because you were his wife. Victoria's eyes closed. She hated the sentence before it finished. We were not investing because Ethan Cole was married to a powerful CEO. Julian's voice remained calm. Ethan supported the investment because the CEO was his wife. Victoria stared at him. It felt humiliating. Not because Ethan had helped. Because she had spent years treating his loyalty like evidence of her own gravity. Julian stood. One more thing. She said nothing. You asked how much of your success was real. Victoria's head snapped up. How do you know I asked that? Ethan told me about your last conversation. Embarrassment flashed across her face. Julian continued. Your success was real. Your mistake was thinking support made it less real. Easy for you to say. No. He walked toward the door. Your mistake was deciding that the people who supported you were less important because you no longer needed to see the support. Then he left. Victoria remained alone. For the first time in years. Her office felt too large. That evening, she came to North Star. No appointment. No lawyers. I let her in. She stood in front of my desk. You supported Viridian before I ever knew North Star was involved. Yes. You bought the creditor position. North Star did. You authorized it. Yes. Why? Because the deal made sense. That isn't all. No. She waited. I looked at her. Because you wanted it. Something broke in her expression. She looked down. For 14 months? Longer. How much money did you risk? Victoria. How much? Enough. Her eyes filled with anger. Why won't you answer anything directly? Because the number isn't relevant. It is to me. Why now? That stopped her. I stood. Why does it matter now? She looked at me. Because I don't know which parts of my life were mine. All of them. That isn't true. It is. I walked toward her. You built Hale Meridian. With your money behind me. Sometimes. Your contacts. Sometimes. Your influence. Sometimes. She laughed bitterly. That's supposed to make me feel better? No. I thought I did this. You did. Alone. I said nothing. She looked at me. That is what you want me to admit. Isn't it? No. Yes. Her voice sharpened. You want me to say I needed you? I stared at her. You did. She flinched. Then I added. And I needed you. Her anger disappeared. For a second. We were 6 years younger. Before the money. Before Adrian. Before the interviews. I continued. That was the point. She looked away. Marriage wasn't supposed to be a competition. I returned to my desk. You turned it into one after you thought you'd won. She whispered. I didn't know. No. That isn't fair. No. My voice hardened. You didn't care. That was worse. She closed her eyes. I opened the drawer and took out a thin folder. What is that? Your divorce proposal. Her head lifted. You already drafted terms. Yes. She looked at the folder but didn't touch it. You really want nothing. Correct. No company shares. No. No property claims beyond what is already mine. No. No settlement. No. She stared. Then why did you stay so long? I knew the answer. That was the problem. Because I loved you. Her eyes reddened. I continued before weakness could reach me. And because I kept thinking the woman I married was still somewhere inside the woman you became. She looked like I had struck her. Then her phone rang. Adrian. She looked at the screen. I did too. She rejected the call. That surprised me. Then she whispered, "Can the Viridian deal still be saved?" There it was. Not as quickly as before. Not as coldly. But still there. I leaned back. Possibly. Her eyes lifted. Under what conditions? North Star would need to reassess governance. I'll cooperate. Your board would need independent controls. Fine. Access privileges would need review. Fine. Adrian would need to be removed from transaction involvement. Silence. Her expression changed. Only slightly. But enough. I noticed. Completely? She asked. Yes. From the deal, at minimum. She hesitated. That 1 second told me everything. Even now, after the humiliation, after the leaks, after discovering what he had risked, she still hesitated. I smiled faintly. You should go. Ethan. Go home. I said I would fix it. No. I pushed the divorce folder toward her. You said you'd cooperate when cooperation was easy. Her jaw tightened. That's not fair. Probably not. I looked at her. But Adrian is about to become a very expensive test of what you actually value. She left without taking the folder. 10 minutes later, Julian sent me another message. Harrington forwarded Cross's approach through Marcus. They want nothing to do with him. I replied, keep everything. Then another message came. A screenshot. Adrian had contacted a second investor. This time his language was more desperate, more dangerous. He was starting to panic. And desperate men reveal themselves much faster than comfortable ones. I closed the file. Victoria had finally learned why the $2 billion deal existed. She still hadn't learned why Adrian wanted it so badly. She would. Soon. Victoria asked to meet me 2 days later. Not at North Star. Not at Hale Meridian. At the apartment where we had lived during the first year of our marriage. I almost refused. Then she sent a second message. No lawyers. No business team. Just us. That was new. I arrived at 7. The building had changed. The old grocery store downstairs had become a wine bar. The hallway had been renovated. But apartment 4C still had the same narrow windows and radiator that clicked every few minutes. Victoria had kept the lease all these years. I hadn't known. She stood by the kitchen counter. No designer suit. No makeup I could notice. Just jeans and a black sweater. For half a second, I remembered the woman who used to sit on that counter eating instant noodles while reading pitch decks. Then she spoke. Thank you for coming. I closed the door. Why here? She looked around. I wanted to remember who we were. That seems dangerous. Her mouth tightened. Probably. There were 2 paper containers on the table. Chinese takeout. The same restaurant we used to order from. She had even bought the cheap beer I once liked. It was almost convincing. Almost. You planned this. Yes. What do you want? She looked hurt. I wanted to talk. You've wanted a lot of things lately. Can you stop treating everything I say like a negotiation? No. Her shoulders fell. I sat. She remained standing. Finally, she said, I fired Adrian from the Viridian transaction. I looked at her. Only the transaction? Yes. Then why are we here? Her face tightened. Because I knew you'd ask that. Good. He no longer has access to the data room. That's not enough. He's been removed from all acquisition meetings. Not enough. She folded her arms. What exactly do you want? I almost laughed. There it was again. As though I was bargaining for a prize. Nothing. Ethan, I don't want Adrian fired for me. Then why does it matter? Because you're asking North Star to trust your governance. She stared. This isn't personal. It is also personal. Finally, she sat across from me. Then say what you're really thinking. I looked at her stomach. Still almost flat. Then back at her face. You're carrying his child. Her eyes lowered. Yes. And you still employ him. Yes. After he publicly humiliated you. He humiliated you. No. I shook my head. He humiliated both of us. She said nothing. He chose the gala because there were cameras. I know. He wanted the world to watch him replace me. I know. He accessed confidential material. I know. He spoke to partners about an executive role. Her jaw tightened. I know. And you still employ him. Silence. Finally, he is the father of my child. I leaned back. There it was. The sentence she had been building toward from the moment I arrived. I nodded. Okay. Her eyes narrowed. Okay. Yes. That is all you have to say. What do you want me to say? I don't know. Then we're making progress. She looked angry. Then tired. The baby did nothing wrong. I agree. That surprised her. I continued. The baby is completely innocent. Then you understand. No. Her expression tightened. I understand that an unborn child has nothing to do with the choices made by two adults. She went still. Do not use the baby as a reason I should tolerate Adrian. I didn't say that. You were about to. She looked away. I continued. You can support your child without employing Adrian. Our child. I stared at her. She corrected herself immediately. My child. Good. At least she wasn't going to insult me that way. She rubbed her forehead. He'll need some place in the child's life. That's between you and him. You make it sound simple. It is simple for me. Her eyes flashed. Because you can walk away. Yes. That hurt her. I didn't apologize. Victoria stood and walked toward the window. Do you know what happens if I fire him now? Yes. Tell me. Your board will probably be relieved. She turned. The media? I don't care. Investors? Will care more about security failures than romance. He'll say I abandoned him because you forced me. I didn't. He'll say I'm choosing the deal over the father of my child. Are you? Her face went still. That is what you're asking me to do. No. I stood. This is what you still don't understand. I walked toward the table. I am not asking you to choose me. Her eyes shifted. I already know your answer. The room went quiet. She whispered. That's cruel. It's accurate. You think I chose Adrian over you. You announced the answer in front of 300 people. He announced it. And you told me not to make a scene. Her lips parted. No response. I continued. You protected him before you protected me. I panicked. You've had days since then. She looked away. You're still protecting him. She sat again. Her voice was quieter. He was there during the worst year of my life. I stared. She continued. You were traveling constantly. For North Star. I didn't know that. You didn't ask. She flinched. I felt alone. So you slept with your aide. I didn't plan it. I laughed once. No one ever seems to schedule betrayal. Her eyes filled. It started with dinners. I don't need details. I think you do. I don't. You were never there. That made me look at her. She regretted it immediately. I stepped closer. Be very careful. I didn't mean yes. You did. My voice stayed low. You want a version of this where I became absent and Adrian filled a gap. She said nothing. I spent months in Europe restructuring the financing that supported your expansion. Her face whitened. I flew back overnight for your birthday. I know. I canceled a board retreat for your father's surgery. I know. I spent 6 weeks negotiating Atlas because your legal department couldn't get acceptable terms. I didn't know. No. I looked at her. You knew I was gone. You never cared enough to ask why. Tears filled her eyes. I cared. You cared that I wasn't available. I stepped back. You didn't care what I was carrying while I was gone. She covered her face briefly. I waited. When she looked up, she whispered, I was selfish. Yes. She laughed weakly through tears. You don't even pretend anymore. You asked for honesty. I know. Her voice shook. I liked how Adrian looked at me. I said nothing. He admired everything. Power is easy to admire when someone else built the floor you're standing on. She flinched. He made me feel. She stopped. Finish. Important. I almost smiled. You were important before him. I know that now. No. I shook my head. You knew it then. She stared. You just wanted someone to perform it constantly. That hit. Because it was true. Victoria looked at the untouched food. Then said, I'll transfer shares to you. I frowned. What? 10%. No. 15. No. 20. I laughed. You're doing it again. What? Trying to turn guilt into a transaction. I'm trying to make things right. With Hail Meridian equity, it is the most valuable thing I have. I looked at her. No. Her voice cracked. Then what do you want? The divorce. She stared at me. No. That surprised me. Not because she refused. Because she said it so quickly. I won't sign. That will delay things. I don't care. I do. Why? Because I want my life back. She looked like the words physically hurt. What if I fix everything? You can't. What if I fire Adrian? That doesn't reverse what happened. What if I leave the company? No. What if Victoria? She stopped. You are still thinking there is a price. Silence. There isn't. Her hands shook. I loved you. Maybe. Her eyes flashed. I did. Then you loved being adored more. That ended the argument. Her phone vibrated. She looked at it. Adrian. Again. She rejected the call. Then it rang again. Rejected. Then a message appeared. She read it. Her face changed. What? She locked the phone. Nothing. I held out my hand. Show me. No. Then we're done. I turned toward the door. Ethan. I stopped. She took a breath. Adrian says the board is asking questions about him. They should. He thinks Daniel is trying to force him out. Daniel is trying to stop your company from bleeding. He says if I fire him, he'll speak publicly. I turned. About what? She looked ashamed. Us. That is already public. Private details. I watched her. What private details? He has messages. Yours? Yes. Company information? I don't know. That was bad. How do you not know? He used my devices sometimes. I stared. You gave him access to personal devices connected to company systems. Her defensiveness returned. He was my executive aide. Stop saying that like it improves anything. She looked away. I pulled out my phone. I'm sending Melissa the contact for North Star Cybersecurity. Victoria looked at me. You'll help? Protect company systems. Her eyes softened. Thank you. Don't. What? Don't make it mean something it doesn't. She went still. I'll protect employees from your mistakes. I looked directly at her. I am not protecting our marriage. Her face collapsed. I left. At 11:04 p.m., North Star Security completed the first scan. At 11:16, they found unauthorized downloads. At 11:23, we traced them to Adrian. At 11:31, Julian called me. You need to see this. I opened the file. Adrian had downloaded confidential investor correspondence, board communications, and a document concerning Victoria's personal shareholding structure. What is he doing? Julian asked. Preparing leverage. Against Hale Meridian? Against Victoria. Julian swore. I looked at the timestamp. The downloads began before Victoria had removed Adrian from the Viridian team. He had planned ahead. Victoria still believed she could manage him because he was the father of her child. Adrian was already preparing for the day she stopped protecting him. I called her. She answered immediately. Ethan, where is Adrian? At his apartment. I think. No. Silence. What? He accessed your private holdings file 2 nights ago. Her breathing stopped. What file? The one covering your Hale Meridian voting shares. That isn't possible. It happened. Why? I looked at the evidence. You should ask him. Ethan. And Victoria? Yes. This is what the risk committee was trying to tell you. She whispered. I know. No. I looked at Adrian's activity log. You're about to. The next morning, her board demanded Adrian's suspension. Victoria asked for 24 hours. She got 6. At noon, she called me. I need more time. For what? To handle him. You've had months. He is the father of my child. I closed my eyes. There it was again. The reason. The excuse. The shield. Then handle him as the father of your child. I paused. Not as an executive with access to a multi-billion-dollar company. She didn't answer. I hung up. At 2:00 p.m., Hale Meridian's board voted. 7-2. Adrian Cross was suspended from all company access. Victoria abstained. That was the moment I understood something important. Even when she knew he was dangerous, she still couldn't bring herself to vote against him. So at 2:14 p.m., I opened the divorce petition. I signed. Not because Adrian won. Not because Victoria chose him. Because I finally understood she had been choosing him in small ways for a very long time. The gala had only made it visible. Adrian's suspension lasted exactly 3 hours before he declared war. At 5:11 p.m., a gossip website published screenshots of private messages between him and Victoria. Not explicit. Adrian was smarter than that. The messages were emotional, intimate, humiliating. I wish Ethan understood me the way you do. Sometimes I feel more myself with you. He doesn't understand what it takes to run this company. That last sentence circulated everywhere. By 6, business channels were discussing whether Victoria's marriage had affected Hale Meridian governance. By 7, 3 shareholders demanded an independent investigation. By 8, Adrian called her. She did not answer. So he sent a message. You shouldn't have let them suspend me. Victoria was in her office with Daniel and Melissa when it arrived. Daniel saw her expression. What? She turned the screen over. Nothing. Melissa folded her arms. Victoria. She closed her eyes. Adrian leaked messages. Daniel stared. You know that? He just texted me. Melissa stepped closer. What exactly did he say? Victoria showed them. Melissa's face hardened. That is evidence. Of what? Retaliation. Victoria laughed bitterly. He's angry. Daniel looked at her. Stop defending him. Her head snapped up. I am not defending him. Yes, you are. Daniel. No. He stepped forward. I have spent 5 days watching you find different words for the same mistake. Victoria stared. He embarrassed me publicly. Yes. He accessed confidential files. Yes. He misrepresented his authority. Yes. He downloaded my personal information. Yes. Daniel pointed toward her phone. And now he's threatening you. Victoria said nothing. Daniel's voice softened. What does he have to do before you're willing to call him what he is? She looked away. Melissa answered quietly. A liability. Daniel shook his head. No. He looked at Victoria. A man who thinks loving you means owning access to everything around you. That sentence hit harder than either of them expected. Victoria sat. For several seconds. No one spoke. Then her phone rang. Adrian. She rejected it. He called again. Rejected. A third time. Melissa said. Answer on speaker. Victoria looked at her. Why? Because I want a record. Victoria hesitated. Then answered. Adrian. His voice came through the speaker. Finally. What do you want? You know what I want. No. Fix this. Victoria laughed without humor. You leaked our messages. You suspended me. The board suspended you. You let them. I abstained. That is worse. Daniel looked at Melissa. Melissa was already recording through company council protocol. Victoria said, What do you mean? You sat there and did nothing while Daniel turned everyone against me. Daniel's expression became almost amused. Victoria's voice sharpened. Daniel didn't make you access restricted files. I was protecting you. By downloading my shareholding structure, silence. Victoria's face changed. Adrian had not expected her to know. Who told you that? That isn't an answer. Ethan, she froze. Adrian laughed. Of course. Victoria stood. Do not bring him into this. He's already in it. You made him part of it. No. Adrian's voice became colder. You keep pretending Ethan is innocent. Daniel almost spoke. Melissa stopped him with one hand. Adrian continued. He destroyed the deal because he couldn't handle losing you. Victoria looked toward the window. No. What? He withdrew North Star because you created a governance risk. Adrian went silent. Victoria continued. You accessed files you had no authorization to access. I had your authority. No. You told me to stay involved. That did not mean stealing restricted information. His voice rose. I did everything for us. For us? Yes. What does Harrington Capital have to do with us? Silence. This time longer. Daniel's head lifted sharply. Adrian finally said, What are you talking about? Victoria's face went pale. She had not known. Daniel immediately looked at Melissa. Melissa was already typing. Victoria whispered, You contacted Harrington? Adrian recovered too slowly. I talked to people. Harrington Capital, they reached out. That was a lie. Everyone in the room knew. Victoria gripped the edge of her desk. What did you give them? Nothing important. Daniel mouthed the words. Oh, God. Victoria closed her eyes. What did you give them? Victoria. You're overreacting. Answer me. I gave them context. What context? The deal was failing. Because of you. No. His voice hardened. Because Ethan wanted it to fail. Victoria looked toward the city. Then, very quietly, You don't understand Ethan at all. Adrian laughed. And you do? That hurt her. She deserved it. Apparently not. He seized on the weakness. Exactly. Then his tone softened. Victoria, listen to me. Nobody moved. They are isolating you. Who, Daniel? The board. Ethan. North Star. Daniel almost laughed. Adrian continued. They want you weak so they can take control. Victoria whispered. Ethan doesn't want my company. That's what he says. He refused 20%. The room went silent. Daniel slowly turned toward her. Adrian did too. Through the phone. What? Victoria realized what she had revealed. Too late. I offered him equity. Adrian's voice changed completely. You offered Ethan shares? It was none of your business. How much, Adrian? How much? 20%. He exploded. Are you insane? Daniel looked at Melissa. There it was. Not hurt. Not jealousy. Money. Victoria heard it too. Her face slowly changed. Adrian continued. You were going to give him 20% of Hale Meridian? He refused. That isn't the point. Then what is? That stock is our future. Silence. Not. Your future. Our future. Victoria stared at the phone. Daniel closed his eyes. Melissa stopped typing. Everyone waited. Adrian realized it 1 second too late. He tried to correct himself. I mean the baby's future. But the damage was done. Victoria's voice became very quiet. Our future. Yes. You already decided Hale Meridian belonged partly to you. No. Then why were you negotiating with Harrington? I told you. Why did you tell outside investors you would join leadership after the deal? Silence. How do you know that? Victoria laughed. The sound was ugly. Everyone knows. Adrian. He began talking faster. They misunderstood. 3 firms? Yes. 3 firms independently misunderstood that I planned to make you an executive. I said I wanted to help. You said I wanted you there. Because you did. No. Victoria's voice rose. I wanted you in my life. Everyone froze. She continued. I never promised you my company. Adrian went silent. Then he said the sentence that finally ended whatever protection remained. You wouldn't have that company without me anymore. Daniel's mouth fell open. Victoria looked almost confused. What? You need me? For what? The press already knows about us. His voice became colder. If you turn on me now, you look unstable. Victoria said nothing. Everyone will think Ethan forced you. Still silence. I can go public. With what? Everything. Melissa's eyes narrowed. Adrian continued. The messages. Trips. Hotel records. Your private conversations about the board. Victoria went white. Daniel whispered. He recorded you? She ignored him. Adrian. I don't want to hurt you. That sentence was almost impressive. Victoria laughed. You are threatening me. I am protecting myself. With my private information. You gave it to me. Because I trusted you. Adrian said nothing. And for the first time, Victoria heard herself. Because I trusted you. The same words I had once said to her. She sat down slowly. Adrian continued speaking. But she had stopped listening. Daniel watched something change in her face. Not anger. Recognition. She finally understood. Trust did not excuse what someone did after receiving it. Access was not ownership. Love was not permission. She whispered. You're fired. Adrian stopped. What? You heard me. You can't. I can. Victoria. You are terminated effective immediately. His voice rose. You'll regret this. I already regret you. Silence. Then the call ended. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Melissa was the first. I'll process termination. Daniel nodded. I'll lock all remaining access. Victoria stared at her phone, then asked, How bad is the Harrington leak? Daniel hesitated. We don't know yet. Find out. Melissa left. Daniel remained. Victoria looked at him. Say it. What? You want to tell me Ethan was right? Daniel sighed. No. Why not? Because you already know. Then he left too. Victoria sat alone. 20 minutes later. She called me. I answered because Julian had already told me about the Harrington issue. Ethan. Her voice sounded different. Empty. What happened? I fired him. I said nothing. Adrian. I assumed. He threatened me. I know. Silence. How? North Star has copies of his Harrington messages. She laughed once. Of course. Another thing I knew before she did. What did he send them? Enough to create problems. Can you stop it? Yes. The word came quickly. She inhaled. You can? We already did. Silence. Harrington contacted us after Adrian approached them. They have no interest in participating. She closed her eyes. I could hear it in the pause. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted the evidence preserved. You wanted me to see who he was. Yes. That was cruel. Maybe. You could have stopped him earlier. Yes. Why didn't you? Because every time someone warned you about Adrian, you protected him. She said nothing. I needed to know whether evidence would change that. Her voice cracked. It did. Good. Another pause. Then, thank you. For what? For stopping Harrington. That wasn't for you. She laughed softly. Painfully. I knew you would say that. I looked at the security report. Hale Meridian employs thousands of people. I know. They didn't choose Adrian. No. I won't let him burn the company to punish you. Her breathing shook. Ethan. Yes. Does that mean no? I cut her off. Don't. She went silent. Do not confuse decency with love. Her voice became barely audible. I wasn't. Yes. You were. I heard her inhale. Then, did you sign the divorce papers? Yes. Silence. When? 2 days ago. She didn't speak for so long I checked the screen. Still connected. Finally. I didn't. I know. I can't. You can. What if I don't? Then the court process takes longer. You really want this? Yes. Her voice broke. Even now, I knew what she meant. Adrian had betrayed her. She had finally fired him. Some part of her thought the story had corrected itself. The villain had been exposed. The marriage could return. But life did not work like that. Removing the knife did not erase the wound. Yes, I said. She began crying. Quietly. I closed my eyes. For years, that sound would have brought me running. Tonight, I stayed where I was. She whispered. I made the wrong choice. No. She sniffed. What? You made a lot of choices. That hurt more. I continued. The gala wasn't one mistake. Silence. You chose him when you lied. She breathed in. You chose him when you let him into our home. Another breath. When you let him speak for you. She started crying harder. When you protected him after he humiliated me. Ethan. And when your board asked whether he should be suspended. You still couldn't vote against him. Silence. You didn't lose me in one night. I looked out the window. You lost me one decision at a time. She didn't answer. Eventually, I ended the call. An hour later, Julian came into my office. How is she? I don't know. He sat. You do. She's hurting. You sound sympathetic. I am. He looked surprised. I don't hate her. That may be worse. For her, yes. I looked at the signed divorce petition on my desk. Adrian had finally betrayed Victoria openly. He had leaked her messages, sold her confidence, threatened her reputation, tried to trade access to her company for a future position. Everything she once admired about his ambition had finally turned toward her. And she had discovered something painful. The man she chose because he worshipped her power had never loved her without it. But that was only half the truth. The other half was worse. By the time Victoria finally understood what Adrian was, I was no longer waiting for her to understand what I had been. 3 weeks after Adrian was fired, Victoria stopped calling me. At first, I thought she had finally accepted the divorce. I was wrong. She had started investigating me. Not my assets. Not North Star. Me. It began with Daniel Reeves. He came to my office on a Thursday morning carrying a file thick enough to require both hands. You know she's doing this. Right. I looked up. Doing what? Reconstructing the last 6 years. I closed the report in front of me. That sounds unhealthy. Daniel dropped the file onto my desk. She asked finance to review every emergency capital event Hale Meridian had during your marriage. I looked at the folder. Why? She wants to know where the money came from. That information is available. Not all of it. I leaned back. What did she find? Daniel sat. The 2019 payroll crisis. I said nothing. His expression changed. You remember. Obviously. Hale Meridian had nearly missed payroll that year. Victoria never knew. The company had been 36 hours from a liquidity breach when I moved $12 million through a bridge facility controlled by North Star. The finance team had presented it as an accelerated receivables transaction. Victoria had been told the crisis resolved because a customer paid early. That was mostly true. The customer paid early because I had guaranteed the discount. Daniel continued. She found the bridge. I nodded. The Berlin acquisition. What about it? She found the debt purchase. I assumed she already knew. She knew North Star bought it. He paused. She didn't know you sold a personal position to fund the purchase. I looked toward the window. That wasn't important. To you. He gave me a long look. Not to her. I picked up my coffee. What else? The Ardent lawsuit. I stopped. That one had been harder to hide. Ardent Technologies had accused Hale Meridian of infringing 3 industrial automation patents. The case could have cost Victoria nearly $400 million. I negotiated with Ardent's founder privately. North Star acquired one of his distressed holdings. In exchange, he agreed to a settlement Hale Meridian could survive. Daniel watched me. You spent 9 months negotiating that. Yes. She thought her legal team won. They did. Ethan. They executed the settlement. Daniel exhaled. You really can't just accept credit. I don't need it. That is exactly the problem. I looked at him. What problem? You think not needing credit means no one else needs to understand what you did. I said nothing. Daniel opened the file. There is more. Of course there was. Victoria had apparently contacted people I had not spoken to in years. Former bankers. Former advisors. Old employees. Even the landlord from our first office. She learned I had turned down the CEO role at a North Star technology platform because the position would have required relocating to London. I declined because Victoria's company was beginning its expansion in New York. She learned I had refused a seat on the board of a public infrastructure firm because she once told me she was tired of people comparing our careers. She learned I had sold early shares in a company that later became worth billions because Hale Meridian needed emergency financing. She learned I had transferred 2 strategic opportunities to her instead of taking them myself. Daniel closed the folder. She asked me why. What did you say? That she should ask you. I smiled. She probably hated that. She cried. That stopped me. Daniel leaned forward. I've worked with Victoria for years. I've seen her scream at bankers, fire executives, walk into negotiations where everyone expected her to fail. He looked at me. I have never seen her cry at work. I looked away. That doesn't change anything. I know. Does she? Daniel hesitated. I think she's beginning to. He left the file. I didn't open it. There was nothing inside I didn't already know. That evening, Victoria visited Margaret Hale. Their relationship had deteriorated since the gala. Margaret still believed Adrian had been a mistake, but she also believed Victoria could repair her marriage if she convinced me that she had suffered enough. That was very Margaret. She treated regret like currency. You need to stop humiliating yourself, Margaret said. Victoria stood near the fireplace. I asked one question. You asked your old employees about Ethan? Yes. You called his former partners? Yes. Margaret set down her tea. This obsession is becoming ridiculous. Victoria looked at her mother. Do you remember the day we almost lost payroll? Margaret frowned. What? For years ago? No. We were 12 million short. Margaret shrugged. You survived. Because Ethan covered it. Margaret went still. Victoria continued. Do you remember Berlin? The factory? He structured the debt acquisition. Margaret's face tightened. And the Arden lawsuit. What about it? He negotiated the settlement. Margaret looked uncomfortable. Ethan always knew people. Victoria laughed. That is what I said too. Victoria, the house you told him he only enjoyed because of me? Margaret's face changed. Victoria stepped closer. His trust owns it. That doesn't mean the aircraft agreement. Margaret said nothing. North Star. Victoria's voice rose. The investor network? North Star. Enough. The Viridian deal? Victoria. He built the support structure. Margaret stood. Then perhaps he should have told you. Victoria stared at her. He did. Margaret froze. Not directly. No. Victoria laughed bitterly. He told me what he did. I just never listened long enough to understand. Her mother frowned. That isn't the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. Margaret looked offended. Victoria continued. You told him he had everything because of me. Her voice cracked. We had everything because we helped each other. Margaret said nothing. And then I started acting like that was embarrassing. She turned away. I made him smaller so I could feel bigger. Don't be dramatic. Victoria spun around. You did it too. Margaret's face hardened. I supported my daughter. You humiliated my husband. He allowed it. That sentence ended the conversation. Victoria stared at her mother, then said quietly, So did I? She left. 2 days later, I received a message. Dinner. 1 hour. No business. No begging. I owe you an apology. I considered ignoring it. Then I replied. 1 hour. We met at a small restaurant downtown. Not expensive. Not private. No cameras. Victoria was already seated when I arrived. She looked thinner. Pregnancy had started showing. Not dramatically. Just enough. I sat across from her. She didn't smile. Thank you. You said 1 hour. I know. A waiter poured water. Neither of us ordered immediately. Finally, Victoria placed a folder on the table. I stared at it. No. Her eyebrows lifted. What? Whatever is in that folder. No. It isn't a deal. What is it? Everything I found. I almost laughed. Victoria, I know you know. Then why bring it? Because I didn't. She opened it. The first page showed the payroll bridge. The second, Berlin. The third, Ardent. Then a list of rejected opportunities. My opportunities. She looked at me. You gave up the Helios board seat. Yes. Because I said I hated being introduced as your wife. I said nothing. You sold Sable shares. Yes. Those shares would be worth almost 90 million today. Probably more. Her eyes filled. And you gave the money to Hale Meridian. Not directly. Ethan. I sighed. Yes. She looked down. You canceled a 6-month assignment in London. Yes. Because I refused to move. You were building the company. You could have become CEO of North Star Systems. I didn't want that job enough. She stared. You wanted me more. At the time. Yes. I didn't say it. She saw the answer anyway. Victoria closed the folder. I don't know how to apologize for this. Then don't. Her face tightened. No. She leaned forward. You were there before anyone cared who I was. I said nothing. When I had 12 employees. You were there. Silence. When I couldn't pay rent. You were there. I looked at her. When investors laughed at me. You found people who wouldn't. Her voice shook. And once those people started applauding, I acted like you were in the way. I looked down. She continued. Adrian admired me. There it was. The truth. He admired the version of me that was already successful. I nodded. And I liked that. I know. He never saw me when I was scared. No, he never saw me when the company nearly failed. No, he saw the title. Yes. She closed her eyes, and I confused being worshipped with being loved. The waiter came. We ordered quickly. When he left, Victoria said, "You never worshipped me." No, I used to hate that. I know. You argued with me. Yes. You told me when I was wrong. Frequently. Her mouth almost smiled. Then the expression disappeared. He made everything I said sound brilliant. Convenient. Yes. She looked at her hands. I thought that meant he understood me. No. I know. Silence. Then she asked, "If I had told you before the gala, would it have mattered?" I knew exactly what she meant. The affair. The pregnancy. The end. Yes. Her eyes lifted. Hope appeared. I killed it. It wouldn't have saved the marriage. Her eyes dimmed. But I might have respected you. That hit harder. She looked away. I continued. If you had come to me privately and told me the truth, I would have hated it. Her eyes reddened. I would have left. A tear slipped down her cheek. But I would have believed there was still something honest left between us. She wiped it away. Instead, Adrian told the world. Yes. And I told you not to make a scene. Yes. She laughed bitterly. I hear that sentence every night. I said nothing. Do you? Yes. Her face crumpled. For a moment, I hated that I had answered honestly. Then she asked, "Did you love me?" I looked at her. What kind of question is that? A selfish one. Yes. She waited. I could have avoided it. I didn't. I loved you enough to disappear. She closed her eyes. So people would see me. Yes. Her breathing shook. I leaned back. That was my mistake too. She looked up. What? I thought love meant giving you whatever room you needed. It wasn't a mistake. It became one. I looked at her. I kept removing myself from your world until eventually you decided I didn't belong in it. Victoria covered her mouth. I continued quietly. I helped create the version of our marriage where you could forget me. No. Yes. You didn't make me cheat. No. I did that. Yes. You didn't make me cruel. No. I chose that. Yes. She cried silently. I didn't move. Eventually, she whispered, "I want another chance." There it was. The sentence I had expected all night. I looked at her. No. She closed her eyes. I knew you would say that. Then why ask? Because I needed to hear it from you. She took a breath. I would leave Hale Meridian. No. I would move. No. I would never speak to Adrian again except regarding the child. No. She laughed through tears. You don't even let me finish. Because none of it matters. It matters to me. I know. I leaned forward. That is the problem. She stared. You are still trying to build a future out of what you are willing to sacrifice now. I paused. I needed you to protect the marriage before it became expensive. She said nothing. The food arrived. Neither of us ate much. When the hour ended, Victoria stood. At the door, she stopped. I used to think losing Viridian would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. I looked at her. And now, she held my gaze. I know better. She left. I stayed another 5 minutes. Then my phone rang. Julian. Board meeting is confirmed. When Monday? What does Victoria want? North Star in the room. I looked toward the door she had just walked through. Fine. And Ethan? Yes. They want the founding principal. I knew what that meant. For years, I had protected Victoria by remaining invisible. Monday would be the first time I stopped. The last time I entered Hale Meridian's headquarters as Victoria's husband. The receptionist barely looked up. The next time, 12 senior executives were waiting in the lobby. Julian walked beside me. So did Rachel. 3 North Star representatives followed. Daniel Reeves stood near the elevators. When he saw me, he straightened. Then he extended his hand. "Mr. Cole." I stared at him. He smiled faintly. "Formal day?" Apparently. Behind him, 2 board members approached. One was Thomas Green, who had once asked Victoria at a holiday dinner whether I planned to get a real job. He looked considerably less relaxed now. "Ethan." "Thomas." He offered his hand. I shook it. His smile was nervous. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. The elevator doors opened. We went upstairs. Hale Meridian's boardroom occupied the entire eastern side of the building. Glass walls. City skyline. 30-foot table. A giant screen displayed the company's current position. The Viridian acquisition had been formally terminated 48 hours earlier. Hale Meridian had lost approximately $180 million in transaction expenses, restructuring costs, hedging losses, and advisory fees. The stock price had fallen sharply. 2 independent directors demanded governance reforms. 3 major shareholders had requested Victoria step down as chair. The company was not dying, but the empire she once believed untouchable had been cracked open. Victoria stood at the far end of the room. She wore a gray suit, no jewelry except a watch. Her eyes met mine. She didn't smile. Neither did I. Margaret wasn't there. Adrian certainly wasn't. Good. Julian and I sat opposite Victoria. The meeting began. Thomas Green cleared his throat. We are here to consider 2 matters. He looked around. First, stabilization of Hale Meridian following termination of the Viridian transaction. A director shifted. Second, the strategic proposal submitted by Northstar. Victoria looked at me. She had seen the proposal. She did not like it. That was not surprising. The terms were strict. Independent risk oversight. New audit controls. Separation of chair and CEO authority. Reduced unilateral access privileges. Mandatory board approval for strategic personnel changes. A governance committee with external representation. And Northstar would provide a financing backstop large enough to stabilize several critical business units. Hale Meridian would survive comfortably, but Victoria would no longer rule it like a private kingdom. Thomas nodded toward Julian. Mr. Mercer. Julian didn't move. Ethan will present. The room changed. Several directors looked at me. Victoria did not. She had expected this. I opened the folder. Hale Meridian's core businesses remain viable. One director nodded. The Viridian failure created losses, not insolvency. I continued. Northstar sees no commercial reason for an emergency sale. Thomas asked, You are willing to provide stabilization capital? Yes. How much? Up to $400 million across debt, preferred equity, and working capital facilities. Several people exchanged looks. Victoria remained still. But, I said, only under the governance package already circulated. One director frowned. The CEO believes several conditions are excessive. I looked toward Victoria. Then she can reject them. Her eyes lifted. Silence. I continued. Northstar is not asking Hale Meridian to accept rescue capital. Another director asked. Then what are you asking? Nothing. I closed the folder. We are offering terms. Victoria finally spoke. Terms that effectively reduce my authority. Yes. Her voice stayed calm. I founded this company. Yes. I remain its largest individual shareholder. Yes. I built its operating structure. Yes. And you believe I should give up control? No. That surprised everyone. I looked at her. I believe your board should decide how much control any one executive should have after repeated governance failures. Her face hardened. Say Adrian's name. Fine. I did. Adrian Cross was allowed access beyond his authority. Silence. He was permitted to represent himself to third parties as though he had strategic standing. Victoria's jaw tightened. He had access to devices and documents that created material risk. I paused. You allowed personal trust to override institutional controls. She looked down. That isn't a personal attack. I continued. It's a governance fact. One director spoke. Victoria has already acknowledged that. Good. I turned toward him. Then the reforms should not be controversial. Victoria looked at me. You make it sound simple. It is simple. No. She leaned forward. You know exactly what these conditions mean. Yes. They mean Hale Meridian is no longer mine. I stared at her. It never was. The room went completely still. Her face changed. I clarified. It belongs to its shareholders. Daniel looked down to hide something close to a smile. Victoria exhaled. You always hated the way I talked about the company. No. You did. I hated the way you began confusing authority with ownership. Her eyes narrowed. The tension broke when the door opened. Melissa Grant entered. Her expression was grim. She walked directly to Thomas. Whispered something. He looked toward me. Then Victoria. What happened? Melissa turned. Adrian Cross's attorney submitted a letter 30 minutes ago. Victoria went pale. What kind of letter? Allegations. Of course. Thomas frowned. Against whom? Northstar. Ethan. Hale Meridian. I almost laughed. Julian didn't. What allegations? I asked. Melissa opened the file. He claims Mr. Cole intentionally caused the Viridian transaction to fail as retaliation for his marital dispute. One director swore. Victoria closed her eyes. Melissa continued. He alleges Northstar abused confidential strategic rights to damage Hale Meridian. Julian leaned back. Convenient. Thomas looked at me. Can we prove otherwise? Yes. Rachel answered before I could. She placed a second folder on the table. North Star's Risk Committee raised governance concerns 16 days before the gala. Melissa stopped. Rachel continued. Written recommendations for conditional withdrawal were circulated 14 days before Mr. Cross publicly disclosed the pregnancy. She distributed copies. I watched Victoria read. Her face slowly changed. Rachel continued. Mr. Cole overrode the recommendation temporarily. Thomas looked up. Why? No one answered. Then Victoria did. Because he trusted me. The room became quiet. Rachel nodded. Correct. Victoria stared at the page. Rachel continued. The final withdrawal occurred after additional unauthorized access was detected on the evening of the gala. Melissa asked. By Adrian? Yes. Rachel opened another file. We also have documented communication between Mr. Cross and Harrington Capital. Victoria closed her eyes. Thomas looked disgusted. He offered them Hale Meridian information? Yes. In exchange for what? Julian answered. A future role. The room erupted. Victoria remained still. She had known most of it, but not all. Then Melissa's phone buzzed. She read the screen. Her expression changed. There is more. Victoria whispered. Of course there is. Adrian's attorney is demanding a settlement. I looked at her. How much? 50 million. Someone laughed in disbelief. Melissa continued. In exchange for confidentiality. Victoria stared at the table. Daniel said. He's blackmailing the company. Melissa nodded. Effectively. Rachel spoke. Do not pay. Victoria looked up. I wasn't planning to. That mattered. The old Victoria might have solved it with money. This one looked tired enough to understand what paying would mean. Thomas turned to Melissa. Refer everything to counsel. She nodded. Then Victoria spoke. No. Everyone looked at her. She straightened. Refer everything to the appropriate authorities and regulators. Melissa blinked. Victoria? All of it. What about personal messages? All of it. Her voice shook slightly. I am done protecting him. The room fell silent. I looked at her. For once, she had made the right decision before it became easy. Too late for us. Not too late for herself. Thomas returned to the proposal. The board needs to vote. Victoria looked at the governance package. Then at me. You won't change the terms. No. Even for me. No. A sad smile touched her mouth. That would have worked once. Yes. Not anymore. No. She nodded. Then turned to the board. I support the proposal. Several directors stared. Thomas said. Victoria. She continued. I also support separating the chair position from the CEO role. Daniel looked surprised. So you are willing to step down as chair? Yes. She looked toward the skyline. I built this company. Then she looked at me. But building something does not mean you get to endanger it indefinitely. I said nothing. The vote passed 8-1. Hale Meridian survived. Victoria lost control. Adrian lost his leverage. North Star gained nothing it had not negotiated openly. When the meeting ended, everyone left slowly. Victoria stayed. So did I. Eventually, we were alone. She looked at the signed agreement. Was this revenge? No? She almost smiled. I knew you'd say that. She looked at me. Then what was it? I thought about the gala. The ring. The pregnancy. The calls. The files. The years. Consequences. Her eyes filled. She nodded. I deserve that. I stood. This isn't about what you deserve. What is it about? What happens next? I picked up my folder. At the door, she said, Ethan. I stopped. If I had changed sooner, I didn't turn. You didn't. Then I left. Behind me, Victoria Hale remained in the boardroom she once ruled absolutely. For the first time, the chair at the head of the table no longer belonged to her. And for the first time, she understood that losing control was not the same thing as losing everything. She had already done that somewhere else. 6 months later, Hale Meridian still existed. That surprised the people who preferred dramatic endings. They wanted bankruptcy, scandal, handcuffs, public ruin. Real consequences were less theatrical. Victoria remained CEO, but she was no longer chair. She answered to an independent board committee. Major capital decisions required additional approval. Executive access rules became strict enough that even Daniel complained about them. Hale Meridian became smaller, safer, less glamorous, and, according to its quarterly report, more profitable. The Viridian deal never returned. Another buyer eventually acquired part of the company. The rest was broken into separate units. Business moved on. It usually does. Adrian did not. His career disappeared almost overnight. The Harrington messages became part of a formal investigation into misuse of confidential corporate information. Several firms permanently blacklisted him. His attorney stopped demanding $50 million after receiving a document request that ran 43 pages. He still appeared online occasionally. Sometimes he claimed he had been manipulated. Sometimes he blamed Victoria. Sometimes me. I stopped reading. The child was born in early spring. A girl. I learned through Daniel. Victoria never tried to involve me. I respected that. She also never used the child for public sympathy. I respected that too. The baby had done nothing wrong. Whatever happened between Victoria and Adrian as parents was none of my business. For the first time in 6 years, a great deal of Victoria's life was none of my business. That felt strange. Then peaceful. My divorce became final 2 months before the birth. The process was less dramatic than our marriage. 1 courtroom conference. 2 signatures. Several asset schedules. No arguments about money. No photographs. No final speech. Just paper. Rachel handed me the decree afterward. How do you feel? Hungry. She stared. That is deeply disappointing. I skipped lunch. You just ended a 6-year marriage. I know. And your emotional response is lunch. No. I folded the document. My emotional response happened months ago. Rachel stopped joking. That was true. The marriage ended in the ballroom. The court merely caught up. 3 months later, Northstar announced its largest new infrastructure platform. Not a rescue. Not an acquisition. Something built from the ground up. $5 billion in committed capital. Energy systems. Industrial automation. AI logistics. 2 continents. For years, I would have remained behind the curtain. Julian disagreed. You're presenting. No. Yes. Why? Because I am tired of journalists describing you as mysterious. That sounds like your problem. It is now yours. I looked at him. He smiled. The board agrees. Traitors. Unanimously. So on a Thursday evening, I walked into another ballroom. Not the Grand Meridian. Different hotel. Different city. Different life. There were cameras. Hundreds of people. A 40-foot screen. For half a second, the similarity almost made me laugh. Then someone announced, Northstar founding principal Ethan Cole. Applause. I walked onto the stage. Not as anyone's husband. Not as the quiet man in the background. Not as the person people whispered about, because they could not understand why Victoria Hale had married someone so ordinary. Just Ethan Cole. The presentation lasted 28 minutes. No drama. No revenge. Numbers. Strategy. Technology. When it ended, reporters crowded the media area. A journalist from a financial network raised her hand. Mr. Cole, why did you remain so private for so long? I thought about it. Preference. She smiled. That's simple. Usually. Another reporter asked, were you concerned people would underestimate you? No. Why not? Being underestimated is only painful if you need the person underestimating you. Several people laughed. I hadn't meant it as a joke. The first journalist asked, your name became public largely because of the Hale Meridian situation. Of course. There it was. Do you regret that? No? Do you regret supporting Hale Meridian for so many years? That question made me pause. Behind the cameras, Julian watched. I answered carefully. No. The reporter looked surprised. Even after everything? Yes. Why? Because the support was real when I gave it. I continued. Something ending badly doesn't mean every good decision before it becomes a mistake. The room went quiet. I meant that too. Victoria and I had been happy once. I would not rewrite 6 years just because I hated the ending. Another journalist raised his hand. Would you ever invest in Hale Meridian again? We already do. As part of the stabilization package. Yes. Doesn't that create a conflict given your personal history with the CEO? No. Why? Because Northstar has governance procedures. A few people smiled. I did too. Barely. The interview ended. When I stepped backstage, Julian handed me a phone. You are trending. Tragic. People apparently find emotional maturity disappointing. I'll try harder next time. He laughed. Then his expression changed. She watched. I knew who he meant. I assumed she might. Daniel texted. I shrugged. Julian studied me. You really are done. Yes. He nodded. Good. That evening, Victoria watched the interview alone. I learned that later. Not from her. From Daniel. She sat in the living room of the Manhattan residence with her daughter asleep upstairs. The house was no longer mine. As part of the divorce, I sold the trust's interest to Victoria at independently appraised value. Not as a gift. Not as punishment. A clean transaction. She paid. It became hers. That mattered more than it should have. For once, nothing in her home existed because I quietly arranged it. The television replayed my answer. Being underestimated is only painful if you need the person underestimating you. Victoria apparently laughed, then cried. Typical. She had improved. Not completely. Nobody does. She became quieter in meetings. Asked more questions. Gave Daniel authority she once would never have shared. She stopped using the phrase "my company." People noticed. Some called it maturity. Some called it defeat. I didn't care which. A week after the North Star event, she sent me a message. One final thing. No request attached. I stared at it. Then, what? Her reply. I found your ring. Of course. I had left it beside her champagne glass. She had kept it. Do you want it? I thought about saying no. Instead, I'll take it. Not because I wanted to wear it. Because I didn't want her keeping a symbol she might mistake for hope. We met in a small park near the river. Public. Daytime. Simple. Victoria arrived pushing a stroller. I looked at the baby. Tiny. Asleep. Victoria stopped. This is Emma. I nodded. She looks healthy. She is. There was no awkward question about whether I wanted to hold her. Good. Victoria understood boundaries now. She reached into her coat and removed a small box. My ring. I opened it. Same platinum band. Same scratch near the edge from when I had repaired a cabinet in our first apartment. 6 years reduced to less than an ounce of metal. Victoria looked at it. I almost had it polished. Why didn't you? The scratch was ours. I closed the box. She smiled sadly. Sorry. For what? Sentimental nonsense. It isn't nonsense. Her eyes lifted. That answer surprised her. I put the box in my pocket. We walked a few steps. The stroller rolled between us. Finally, she said, I used to think the worst moment of my life was when the transaction portal said suspended. I looked ahead. I remember. I thought you had destroyed everything. I know. You hadn't. No. I did. I said nothing. She stopped walking. I don't mean the deal. I turned. She looked at me. I mean us. Yes. She took a breath. I have rehearsed about 20 versions of this conversation. That sounds exhausting. A small laugh escaped her. It was. She looked toward the river. In most of them. I asked whether someday. Maybe after enough time. No? She closed her eyes. I know. Then don't ask. I wasn't going to. We stood in silence. Then she said, there was a future where we fixed this. That sentence hurt more than I expected. I nodded. Yes. Her eyes filled. When I looked at her, there was a version of our future where we stayed together. She waited. I could see hope trying to form despite everything. So I told her the truth. You were living in it. Her face broke. She looked away. I continued softly. That was the chance. She wiped her cheek. I know. No one gets unlimited versions. I know. The baby moved in the stroller. Victoria bent to adjust the blanket. When she straightened, she looked calmer. Are you happy? I considered it. Yes. Her lips trembled. Good. I believe she meant it. That was probably the greatest proof she had changed. Months earlier, she would have wanted my happiness to include her. Now she accepted that it didn't. We said goodbye. No hug. No kiss. No dramatic final embrace. She pushed the stroller one direction. I walked the other. After 20 steps, I heard her call. Ethan. I turned. She stood beneath the trees. I am sorry. No explanation. No excuse. No Adrian. No company. No pregnancy. Just, I am sorry. For the first time, I believed she understood what the words meant. I nodded. I know. Then I left. A year after the gala, a reporter asked me about the Viridian acquisition again. We were standing outside North Star's new operations center. The journalist had apparently studied the old scandal. People still say you killed a $2.4 billion deal in one night. I smiled. That isn't accurate. But you withdrew the authorization. Yes. Knowing the transaction would collapse. Knowing the risk no longer justified participation. She tilted her head. Isn't that the same thing? No. Then what would you call it? I looked through the glass behind her. Engineers moved across the operations floor. People built things. Nobody cared who I had once been married to. Nobody whispered about whether I deserved to be there. I thought about the hotel ballroom. Adrian raising his champagne glass. Victoria staring at the table. My wedding ring beside hers. Don't make a scene tonight. She had been right. I never did. I simply stopped giving away the things that required my consent. The reporter waited. I said, I didn't kill the deal. She frowned. What did you do? I stopped signing for people who thought my signature was theirs forever. She smiled. That sounds personal. It was a lesson. For Victoria, I shook my head. For me, that surprised her. I continued walking. For years, I thought loyalty meant staying, fixing, protecting, absorbing damage quietly because love was supposed to make sacrifice meaningful. I had been wrong. Loyalty without respect was not devotion. It was permission. And once I understood that, leaving became much easier. I didn't take Victoria's empire. I didn't need it. I didn't ruin her company. I helped keep it alive. I didn't destroy Adrian. He did that himself. All I took back was the one thing I should never have surrendered completely. My own life. This time, when I walked through the main doors, nobody introduced me as Victoria Hale's husband. Nobody needed to. And neither did I.